Alright, let's go ahead and get started, guys. How are you guys doing today? Things going alright? Things are going okay for me. Played some D&D yesterday. No D&D tomorrow. Usually I play tomorrow, but I'll be busy, actually. Do a little date thing. So we're gonna do that instead. Can't always be all D&D all the time. I know. It's disappointing, but you do what you have to do for the people in your life. Nah, I'm just kidding. We have people out anyway, so we're that. It's been some fun time doing some other stuff. Just getting some things cleared up here. Look at that. I feel like this misty marsh ambience is gonna make me sleepy. I don't really think that's gonna make for a good stream if I start dozing off. Get that coffee going. And let's do, I think there's another one. Let's try something else. Let's try this one. What's that sound like? I need to turn on my own microphones. Oh, that's real low though. That is just sort of ambient. This is gonna be too... We'll do that. I think this matches the energy of that session, our last session, which I think is going to be the first thing that we're going to hop into. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened in the last session. And I've got my notes right here. Haven't had a chance to type them in, so we'll do that as we're going along. How about that? I don't think I took the greatest notes this session, so we're going to do our best. A little too busy. It's hard when we have a session like this latest one, that is very combat focused. It doesn't give me a lot of time to take out notes. Too busy kind of like running the combat. But we'll go ahead and do it. Let me go ahead and let's start my notes. What do we got here? I think this is just some cleanup from last time, right? Skin diving, Jeffeth. Gilder, the impromptu fight. Yeah, no, that's all. So, okay, we're good. We're good. So let's go ahead and hop in. We'll take a little look at session prep. Kind of talk about what went on, and then because we're not gonna have to do too much session prep for the next session, we'll just knock it out real quick, I think, and we'll go from there. Or at least we'll get most of it done. Now I gotta turn that sound down in my ears. Been too loud for me. I hear myself talk. Alright, I guess I can just show you it. Alright, let me do that. Oh, great, it's already got the window capturing. Great. So this was session 9, we ran this yesterday. Spring Maiden 61, it is Loam's Day, not that that's important. It's only important to me because I'm crazy like that and I want to know what date it is so I know what's going on. And I say that, but we did actually need to know the phases of the moon. What phase the moon was in, because they were trying to determine how much moonlight was out. So it was nice to have the calendar and be like, oh, I know how much moonlight there is. One of those things you can always improvise, you don't really need it, but it's always nice that way I'm not always just being like, oh, well, it's a crescent moon, or it's waxing, or it's waning, or it's full moon, or it's a new moon, or half moon, quarter, whatever. But it's nice to just know it, just have a quick look on it, and I just have it written down on my calendar for the phases of the moon, so I can just look at it real quick. Alright, let's see. So, Caleb there, Seven there, Swain there, Zarnock there. Sniz is still in the wings right now, still being kind of carried around by the party as a cardboard cutout around. We're not sure whether the player is going to be able to stay in the campaign or not. They've got some scheduling issues, so we're going to have to figure that out. But for right now, Sniz is a cardboard cutout hanging out in the back of the boat. Doing that. So we're keeping plot points away from Sniz at the moment. Even though we've got this one down here, I think. No, I took it out. I took it out of the foreshadowing. The folk are no longer digging the fields. Let's update that real quick, I think. They're no longer doing that. That was also on the calendar. I need to update that. I forgot to do it. Not that it's coming up right now. They're not. They're kind of out in the middle of the marsh, so they're not talking to anybody. So we are 61. So they are okay. They're sowing spring grain. Just so I remember what they are. And here are the actual notes from the session. It's the same thing you're seeing on screen. I just make a couple of hand notes while I'm in it. Not too big of changes here. I got some stat block stuff and some improv stuff. I did use the stat block, didn't use the improv stuff, but it kind of goes like that. Never quite know what you're gonna need when you sit down to play. So it's nice to, at least in my idea, to kind of have some extra help. Even if I don't need it, I can always save it for another session. Weather, relatively unimportant. So we did our Russian checks. They only have a few days until the spring festival happens, so they need to wrap up their current thing. To those of you who didn't see the last time, their current mission is they were helping protect some boats, some fishermen boats while they were fishing, primarily to keep some sort of seagulls off the boats to get as much of the fish catch as they can and preserve it, so the seagulls don't steal away with it once it gets on the boat. They had this sort of acquaintance that they had briefly known, Severin had briefly talked to, shows up. They have a little tiff about some things that's not really important for this, and then it's like, hey, there's gonna be a change of plans. I'm gonna go. I heard this rumor about this gold claim. The people have just found, some prospectors have just found gold, but there's not an official claim struck yet. So we want to go tonight and see if we can sort of jump the claim, and not necessarily set their own claim, but go in there and try to steal take as much gold as they can. That's just easy for them to pick up and run away with, while there's still not any sort of official legal enforcement around the area yet. So that was sort of the plan. They kind of went back and forth. They decided to take the group with them because, right, they're adventurers rather than take these random fishers with them. So they're like, okay, well, you guys can come with me, and then Jeff is kind of oversee them. They've gotten the understanding now that some of these people are part of some sort of organization that deals in some sort of underground activities, some slightly maybe less than legal activities. And so we have one PC in particular who's interested in that stuff, and that person is not the rogue, and we also have a rogue in the party. So that's already that's already 50% of the party is kind of leaning on the fence in that direction. So we're kind of leaning into that. So they are on their active con saves because they've been awake basically for 24 hours because they left right before sunset and did their fishing, and now they were waiting overnight. But this sort of interrupted their rest, and Jeff was like, let's go now. Time is of the essence. And so has convinced them to leave with him rather than take their long rest and leave in the morning after the sun's up. So they leave while it's still dark out. And that's sort of where we kind of pick up. So the first thing that kind of happened, and we'll just go down here. Let's go ahead and, I guess we could do one here. Let's do... This is going to be the easiest place to do it. I guess we'll just do it down here at the bottom. That's fine. And put us a new heading. So we're going to put the recap here. I'll say session recap. So what sort of happened in that session? Okay. Obviously, we're going to be talking about stuff that's going on with this campaign. So if you're one of my players, don't watch this. I don't know what you're doing. You're going to ruin stuff for yourself. You're going to see how the sausage is made, and that's generally decreases your fun. But, that's your warning. So if you decide to watch anyways, and you do whatever you're going to do, I guess. But for everybody else, you guys can see how the sausage is made, and hopefully that'll give you some insight as far as your own dungeon mastering, your game mastering, or if you're interested, maybe you're interested in it but you haven't done it before, this will kind of give you an idea of like how to jump into that. and that it's not nearly as difficult or complex as often it can seem from the outside, from the other side of the screen. So let's hop into it. So that session recap. So they jump in the boats, and set off. So there's a bit of discussion about like who was going to do the paddling, because Jeff is in the back guiding the boat, so obviously he's going to be paddling in the boat. But other people are in desperate need of healing. That seagull fight really kind of cleaned their clocks a little bit. So we have people who are out of spells, we have people who are really hurt, and people who are out of sort of their long rest recharge abilities. So and some short rest recharge abilities. So they have a discussion. It turns out that Caleb is actually going to be in the front. So Caleb and Jeff have opportunity to talk a little bit while the other two are kind of doing a little cat nap and trying to get at least a short rest out of the way. Especially Severin, who already has exhaustion, and when they're about to tip into another point of exhaustion for being up too long, that was going to be real bad for him. You really don't want him to be slowed. Though, technically Swain already slows the party, and it doesn't really matter that much because they're in a boat. But as soon as they get on dry land, it's an issue. Which, they're on dry land now. That's where they ended the session. But we'll get there. So Caleb's in front, and they talk about the change in the ferry's landing. So this is one of those things, if you're familiar with the Return of the Lazy DM, or Return of the Lazy Game Master. Dungeon Master? Gosh, why am I blinking on Sly Flourish's book? Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, right? Yes. Anyways, what I was going to say is that then you're going to be familiar with the secrets and clues. That's the foreshadowing of up here, so we definitely got through this. Let's, no, that's for heading. I need to format, text, strike through, Alt-Shift 5, that's what it is. So we did this one, the Island Ferry. So this is letting them know, like, hey, here are the consequences of you guys not dealing with the Sturges. Now the Sturges have gotten so bad that the ferry, where the ferry lands on the island, is overrun by those. It's too dangerous, so they've actually moved where the ferry lands on the island. Just, like, bit by bit, letting them know, like, hey, you guys didn't deal with this, so things do get worse. At least before they get better. Once they get back to town, they'll find out this stuff with Cass and Severin. Oh, I didn't have it written down, but it is up here. Cass is their NPC who has stayed in town. He's the responsible one and got a real job. And he's working for the apothecary who they delivered instructions to, who is making poison for the Sturges. And so the Ghazi, who is sort of like the knight or minor noble who's in charge of that area where the Sturges are, is doing what they're going to do to try to take care of the situation. Now, they're not working on 100% factual information because our party lied to them and pretended that they completed the quest, which they very much did not. And so that's probably going to get them into more trouble later, but we'll see. We'll see if that karma comes back up on them. So, that's what happened. They talk about that. Everything's pretty meek for the first time. They complete their short rest. And they get back, and in that next scene, they take a bend in the river. And they come across the Maker's Oracle. We'll just say temple. They don't know it's an oracle. Maker's Temple ruins. So there are some ruins in the marsh that they're going past. It's an old temple, a relatively small one. So think like a small sort of like country church kind of deal. It's not a big grand temple. They're going past it, and they're coming around the bend. And as they come out of the bend of the marsh and into that bank, that's where the grass actually isn't that high, so they can actually see out across the ground, and that's where they see it. The thing is that the reason they can see it is because it's absolutely lit up with firelight. And torches and braziers. And they're like, oh, that's weird. Now they're kind of on a somewhat stealthy mission, so they go ahead and douse their lantern on the boat as they're gonna just. Their plan is to kind of just sneak by. or to just like basically not engage, which is what they try to do. And but the problem is like there's this open space, so the firelight is also being thrown out across the ground to see them from multiple light sources. So as they're watching this, they see that there is, and we're not going to beat around the bush, they're cultists. They're going to be obvious cultists. They've got the robes on with the hoods up, and you know they've got the nasty Chris dagger, ritual dagger. They take one of the people, throw off their robes. They're of course totally naked under the robes. Throw them onto this stone altar, and jab this Chris knife into them. Open up their stomachs, pull out their entrails while they're still alive, and start divining using them. You know, sort of head priestly cult figure. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of chanting and drum beating in the background, very sort of like dirge ritual kind of thing going on. So they're watching that and they're starting to freak out. They're like, "What the fuck? Like, this is not normal." So they're doing that, and one of the things that they catch within the ruins is there is sort of like a pin that's been an impromptu cage that's been made, and it has a person, at least one person in it that they can see. And that person locks eyes with one of the PCs and starts yelling about how they start calling for help. Saying they're with them. Oh, I realize you can't see what I'm typing. Let me move this up. Up. There we go. So the cage person is calling for help. They're with the mud snake. This is a thing that I don't think the players really picked up on. It's always I'm not gonna say frustrating. It's just a thing that happens where you throw out proper nouns at players and they're like just whoosh, right past them. And I think this was one of those, saying that they're with the mud snake. They don't know what that name is. They didn't seem to investigate. They didn't make a knowledge check on it. They were more concerned with the person pulling intestines out of another live person, who is not yelling about it. They seem to be pretty placid about it, which is interesting. So that's sort of the situation. But as that person who calls out for them, that raises the alarm with the people who are in there, that are cultists, who kind of look at that person, follow their eyesight to over there. They can see the boat with the light that they have, at least the faint edges of it. I said that it was probably about 60 feet away is where the temple is from the riverbank where they are. And so they kind of spur into action. The priest is like, "Get him." Obviously, this seems like something they probably don't want survivors for. So we're going to say our head cultist calls for their lackeys to get him. And so yeah, then they start charging down. We go into combat. So what happens is roll some initiative, and the cultists actually end up kind of charging down. I let the lackeys go first, and I was going to give them about 30 feet of sort of dry ground, and then another 30 feet of sort of like marshy ground. But they're kind of running at a downhill, so they have to like hitch up their robes kind of around their waist as they sort of run downhill at these people at our party. And they run downhill at them, and they start shooting off some magic. What I didn't know is that they were going to be absolute crack shots. DM dice are hot. In the first couple rounds, I don't think I rolled anything under a 12, and I was rolling with disadvantage for attacks. Sometimes the dice are not kind to the players. Usually they're fine to the players, but this time not so much. They come down, they start lighting it up, and it's all radiant energy, because they're all cultists. They're running down and doing that. There's not too much to really say about the combat. The combat's pretty straightforward. They run down, they get a bunch of good shots off, which leaves with Zarnok unconscious, then healed back, then knocked unconscious again. I don't think anybody else got knocked unconscious, though. I think Zarnok's the only one. Which, speaking of which, we're going to need to go back and do that. Because I forgot about that. I'm forgetting about my own home rules. House rules. So we need to... I'm going to make a note for myself. Because I forgot to do this with Zarnok before. Zarnok needs to roll on lingering injury table. Because I forgot about that. And he's going to need to do that. And this is a house rule that I sort of implemented just because I wanted to be a little bit more... have a little bit more consequence from being knocked down to 0 hit points and essentially being KO'd. Because I think that 5e 2024 really has a problem where you're like popping up and down out of unconsciousness. Which really kind of just puts you at a floor where you're not taking damage, so it kind of mitigates a bunch of damage, kind of the threat of an encounter by doing that. Unless, right, they hit whatever it is, like double your max. It has to hit your max HP in one hit or whatever it is. In the negatives for you to like just outright die from massive damage. So that's pretty unlikely. I mean, at level 1 it could definitely happen, but generally it's unlikely. And so you see a lot of pop up, pop down kind of stuff that happens, a lot of shenanigans. So trying to mitigate some of that, but I need to actually do the thing. So, that's that situation. Let's see, what else do I got in my notes? And they hit on darkness into the marsh. And they missed that. So, it kind of goes back and forth. What really happens, the main thing is that when things look bad, they were trying to leave the combat. Now, the problem is when Zarnok gets knocked unconscious, he actually drops his paddle. Because at this point, he at some point had switched out with Caleb at the front of the boat. And he was doing the paddling because he's the one guy, I think, in our party who has a positive strength modifier. So it's been an issue. It will continue to be an issue. They've done some things like try to climb, and that's really difficult for them. Or descend like they were into the big sinkhole in the earlier adventure that they really struggled with because then they only have one person in their party who has a positive strength modifier. Anyways, dropped his paddle. Makes it difficult to propel the boat. And nobody kind of like tried to grab it. They were all busy doing other things in combat, which is perfectly reasonable. So they're trying to use like spears and other things like poles to kind of just push off the... It's a shallow area, so they're just trying to get the boat moving. So it takes some time, but they do escape around the bend. Just after Severin jumps out of the boat and flees on foot. So what happened is that things were getting bad. The cultists were getting very close, and really, again, I'm rolling hot on the dice, so they're getting hit. So things are not looking great. Severin decides that they're going to basically jump over the side of the boat and just run up on the other bank and just run into the darkness of the marsh and hide themselves in it. Perfectly good retreat, I think. I think that's a perfectly sound thing. Problem is they didn't talk to anybody. They just kind of did it. So they jumped out. So everybody else was like, you just kind of abandoned us in the middle of that fight. Especially when we had one person down. But they do that. Caleb our cleric is able to pedal the boat around the bend finally, which kind of breaks line of sight, and they're able to paddle for a while. And then Japheth and them pull it over to the side. So they kind of pull the boat up on the shore once they think that they've gotten kind of far enough away. At which point Swain's going to jump out. Jumps out to go... You guys remember, one of our friends just ran into the darkness of the night in the middle of a marsh. So, dangerous out there. You don't know what's out there. So has gone out there to find. We did send, I believe, 2 people who also do not have survival. So into the night. So it is that kind of game. We have a lot of people. Our PC is a party who is somewhat out of their depths when it comes to sort of the wilderness exploration stuff. They don't really have a ton of people who have survival or good tracking skills or, like I said, athletics and strength and things like that are needed to like climb over things and jump up on things and sort of stuff. So it has been more difficult than it might be, would say, like if they had a ranger in the party, or if they had even a barbarian. Really, anybody who was strength focused or had a little bit more wilderness stuff off the under their belt. Because right now, all our PCs are pretty much, for the most part, are all city dwellers. They're all urban kids, so they're kind of out of their depth in this sort of island boonies area, but they're figuring it out slowly but surely. So Swain jumps out to go find Severin. Zarnok has a little sleep. Basically trying to get that short rest in. I'm just gonna say a little sleep because he does not get the full short rest in. They unfortunately are going to get found by the cultist again. So Swain jumps out to go find Severin. Zarnik has a little sleep. Caleb and Japheth, the NPC, argue about leaving because Swain says, or Caleb tells him that, oh, we'll wait 10 minutes. It should take like 10 minutes to go find my friend. 10 minutes comes and goes. Another 10 minutes comes and goes, and then he gets into an argument with Caleb about the cleric about like, hey, how long are we gonna wait for these people? We got to get out of here. Like this isn't that safe of a place. And as they're sort of having this argument, we're gonna say that they are found by the cultists again. So they went a ways away, but they're also like having a conversation in the middle. It's the middle of the night. There's not that much noise, so it's not too difficult to sort of like pick them up sound wise. But we'll jump back to Swain and Severin. So it's pretty straightforward. I have them doing a couple of survival checks just to try to see how long it's going to take them to kind of like meet up. And they play a little Marco Polo out in the marsh, trying to figure that out as the party split. But Swain hears a familiar voice just behind his ear. It's a little call and response. Swain asks if I think he just says I think he says, is anybody out here, I believe is what he said. I'm trying to remember verbatim. It's very close. Anybody else here? Just behind his ear, he hears that familiar voice. And he says, I'm always here. Now, Swain, our tiefling artificer, sort of like maverick gunslinger. He's kind of got that Wild West card shark maverick gunslinger kind of thing going on, as well the artificer, working on making his first gun. So that's a thing that he's slowly working on. But he has made a deal. He's a tiefling. He's made a deal with a fiend. To cover some just basic gambling debts and things of that nature. Thing is that he's not really sure in character what the fiend gets out of the contract, because he's in a moment of desperation. Of course, does that thing where he's like, "I'll do anything," and then, the fiend's like, "Oh, excellent, anything, huh?" And so I kept it pretty loosey-goosey because I didn't know what I wanted to do with that yet. Now I know what that is, and I think it's pretty diabolical. All Swain has to do is do things that Swain would normally do, and that powers up the demon. Or fiend, we'll say. Generic fiend. So, but I just wanted to put the little bug in his ear because he finally got to a moment where he was by himself in the dark alone, and then realized, like, hey, you're not alone. Just kind of put that little, that little sound bite in the ear. So just a little familiar thing. Just be like, oh, by the way, this is awful. You're in an awful situation. Does anything else particularly happen? No, they do get discovered by the cultists. And unfortunately, when they get discovered by the cultists, does happen is that Zarnok did not get their full rest in. They can get their full short rest in, so they don't have their 1 hit point back. So they have one of their player characters who is just unconscious in the boat. And unfortunately, this time I didn't make little cards, or else I would have given it to Zarnok's player to be like, have him play some of the cultists, but I didn't think about that beforehand. And in fact, I had completely forgotten about it, and the stat blocks for those guys were actually handwritten rather than typed out, because I had forgotten about them. So, they are found with the cultists. I could have at least had him roll, I suppose. Trying to be better about that, because I think it's helpful to have something for players to do when their player characters are kind of unconscious. And so I spent a little bit of time unconscious now. And he's the fighter, he's the person who needs to take the hits and goes down. He's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. It just happens that it's happened a lot recently. So they're found by the cultists. And Japheth, because Japheth's like, we got to go, because they hear the cultists before the cultists, like, they're aware of each other, but they're still not within eyesight of each other through the marsh. Says they have to go. And starts pushing the boat off and paddling. But Caleb stops him with I think I had him do a strength check. Caleb stops the boat. And then they kind of get into a scuffle. Let's see. Japheth tried to hit him with a paddle, which he missed, and Caleb clocked him in the face. So the two guys that are in the boat are just kind of having a scuffle over the unconscious body. The other two have met up with each other in the marsh, and one's kind of pale and freaked out about the voice they just heard. Presumably not in their heads, presumably around them, but they didn't see them. They didn't see the thing tormenting them. And they start rushing their way back. Obviously, there's going to be some noise that starts being made, so it's pretty easy for them to find their way back. Swain also made the boat smell like garlic, which was a very funny thing to do. So he used his magical tinkering to make the boat smell like garlic, specifically so it would help him find his way back to it by sense of smell, which I thought was very funny. But they didn't have any problems finding the boat on the way back. It just took him a little longer. Like, they didn't immediately, like, beeline. They had to figure it out a little bit. But they got there. And let's see. The cultists close. And while Caleb's distracted, Japheth, again, just tries to push him out of the boat. Unsuccessfully. Another sort of combat breaks out. Swain slides into cover behind the boat. Severin hops in the boat. And Caleb pushes them off the bank. And starts paddling. They get pretty close again, so they have some more shots. A few more people get hit. And what I do want to say is that one of the things that I did is, because Zarnok's player had an unconscious character, I was like, okay, well, when it comes up on your turn, you're already stabilized. They've already spent the healer's kit to stabilize you, so you're not in any risk of dying. but I'll go ahead and let you, once your turn, roll a death save. So that way you can just fish for a natural 20. If you get the natural 20, I'll let you pop up with 1 hit point. He's like, great, yeah, I'll do that. And of course, we manifested that because Zarnog absolutely does roll a natural 20. And boss back up with 1 HP. He would soon go down right after that, I think, in the next turn. But I think he got at least one turn of action in the second round. Again, the combat's pretty straightforward. They get popped a couple times. Japheth takes a couple hits, or I think just one. Takes a hit. Looks bad because he's an NPC, remember? He's not a heroic adventurer. He's just kind of a guy. So he does not look good after he gets hit with one of those radiant beams. But they're able to sort of go out. Caleb did there's little things about the combat that were fun, but they didn't have like a massive impact. So there's stuff like that sometimes I don't put in the notes. Like there will be stuff like in the first fight, Swain casted firebolt on the ground in front of the cultists to try to make a light, so it was more difficult for them to see through the light to see them through it, so they would have disadvantage on their attacks. That's why I was like, well, I was just rolling high, because I rolled so high that even with disadvantage, they hit 3 out of 4 times in that first round. I was like, I'm sorry, man. Like this, I just rolled really hot. Really sucks when you do something cool like that. Or in this one, Caleb used his last spell slot to cast command on the first one that came out and had them drop it, what they were holding, which was their lantern. We rolled for it, their lantern breaks on, I guess, rock in the marsh, and fire starts spilling out in oil and fire, very Molotov cocktail-esque. Kind of spreads out the fire into the marsh. Kind of keeps them from where they can like get into the water and get onto the boat. Kind of kept them at bay. So doing stuff like that. So they have those little things I just usually not bringing up because they're not super. They didn't like break the fight or anything, but they were still cool and very sort of tactical and very useful. So I don't want to undersell my players. They're doing a good job. They're just in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't an earth-shattering alteration of what happened. They do that fight. I think this is where Caleb does they're really struggling to get around the bend because remember they only got one paddle. They only have one paddle for the boat now. So we're gonna say Caleb's Herculean. So Caleb's been giving his prayers up to the gods, and they see him filled with divine light as he makes this Herculean effort. Nat 20. Strength check to pull the boat around the next bend and back out of sight of cultists. And from there, we're fully out of combat. They did 2 combats with the same group back to back. They did not, I'll be honest, I think only one of those cultists, I think, took any damage in both of those fights. This is very much, they were on their heels both of these fights. They were caught unawares, sort of. Not unawares on the first one. On the second one, they were definitely caught unawares and split up, and there's this thing where... sorry, there's the whole reason I put this in here. So, Swain slid into cover behind the boat, but not in the boat. After Severin hops on the boat, Caleb pushes them off the bank, so the boat is like leaving and Swain's not on it. Zarnog immediately rolled that natural 20. Was able to Predator Handshake, grab Swain and pull him back onto the boat. And I guess just onto the boat, not back on the boat. He didn't pull out of the boat. So that was a really cool thing. So we got that natural 20, throws down, Predator Handshake, drags him into the boat. And we have that great roll from Caleb to get them around the bend, and they are pulled out of danger. Luck finally turns their way, and they're able to sort of escape that fight before it probably went really, really sour. And things went really bad. Like getting put in that animal cage, like that impromptu pen and probably having their own entrails pulled out while they're still alive. Not things you want for your player characters, generally. So they are able to escape. They get back into it as they're going away, and Jaff is sort of paddling. And and I think it was Severin, right? He looked over. Severin. And goes, I think we should rest. As he has these sort of like almost radiation style burns on him from that radiant energy weapon. As he sort of eats his crow and tells Severin, okay, yeah, maybe taking a long rest is not a bad idea. After he's lost most of his health, or most of his hit points in that fight. And they're like, okay, well, where are we going to do it? And they're trying to figure stuff. And he's like, well, I think we should probably get out of the marsh. I think that's a good idea. We've got a portage across this sort of area of dry land that is, we're going to call it a mountain, but it's really just a tall hill that we need to portage across. It'll save us a bunch of time if we do that. It'll be dry land. We can camp there. So they do that, and they make it there. And they set camp on the, again, I'm going to use my own mountainside. Again, it's just like this big hill that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And as the sun's rising. So we do a couple checks to see what's happening. Make sure anything fun happens. The only thing that happens is Swain rolls a 12 on 1d12, which usually means that there's some sort of so I roll d12 for random encounters. If you've watched this before, on 1 it's some sort of encounter. It's usually a combat with some sort of creature. On a 12, it's usually some sort of wilderness dressing or effect that's happening, but it's usually not a combat. It could be a combat, but usually it's not. So you roll a 1, usually a combat. Roll a 12, usually not a combat. Anything in between, nothing happens. Roll a 12, fog rolls in. So in the wee morning, as they're trying to, it was before the sun rises, as the night flags. Yeah, as night flags. We'll say that. As night is flagging, and you're starting to get that haze on the horizon. I was moving a little bit ahead. The sun's definitely up after they finish the rest, though. He rolls his 12. The fog rolls in the late hours of the night. And then we hang for a second. And then I was like, yeah, that's it. There's nothing else happens. Just a bunch of fog comes in. Just to keep them on their toes. Be like, is it safe? Eh? Now, that would obscure their view later, as that was burning off. But otherwise, they got their long rest. Long rest completed. And I think the only thing that's notable about that, we had multiple PCs reduce their ration die. Dice? Dies, because the plural of dies is dice. I guess ration dice. Reduce their ration die. So we had a number of people who went down to a D4. So we use a resource usage die to track stuff like arrows and ammunition, that kind of stuff. And so anytime that you have a scene where you usually use something, you have a die size associated with it. Maximum is 6 for carrying stuff on your back, a D6. You roll it. If you roll a 1, it goes down in size to a D4. If you roll a 1 on a D4, it goes down to 1, which means you have like 1 use or 1 day of rations left or whatever. So they reduced, I think a couple people had to reduce their ration dice to D4s. So they haven't had a chance to resupply. Some of them didn't do it when they were in town. So they've got some rations that are going down. Probably not going to be an issue, but could be. We'll see. We'll see what happens. They might have to go foraging for something, which again, we picked a bunch of city rat kids so for this campaign, so they're not really great at doing like foraging stuff, so we'll see. Caleb does have the brass kazoo trinket, though. If you're unfamiliar with that, that is one of the trinkets that you can get. If you it's in the shape of a fish. If you blow it underwater, a fish will come up to you, like just a common fish. So it makes it fairly easy to at least catch fish. If you do the old like bear paw and you just kind of like, you can just like swat it out of the water onto the bank. You won't need any sort of equipment for that. So it is possible for them to do. So they're not going to just starve out here, probably. Anything else happen in the long rest completed? They start the march. They orders a boat. And they get into everybody. Everybody kind of gets into an argument. There's a lot of like intra-party friction, not in a bad like way, like players are mad with players, like that. The player characters are upset with each other with like things like Severn jumping out of the boat and abandoning them in a fight, or you know, yeah, and it's just stuff like that rather than get into the nitty-gritty. And there's a little bit of backbiting and let's say smoldering. And I'm not even sure I want to call it really an argument. Yeah, let's just leave it at backbiting. And we'll say resentment. Light resentment. Again, like Jeff is getting his own jabs in there, with Caleb being like, "This is the guy you wanted." Looking at Severn, that's the guy you wanted us to wait for. That's the guy who abandoned you during combat. That's the guy you want to wait for. Stuff like that. So he's poking the bear as well. There's a lot of friction on this trip. Nobody's happy. Nobody wants to be doing this. Well, I mean, they want to be doing it. They just would like it to be a little bit more pleasant of a time. Even after the long rest, like people are tired still, and they're out in the middle of the marsh. It's humid and hot, and it's not fun. And these people are not used to this kind of work. This is not the life that they know. Is there anything else that happens while they're forging the boat? Fog begins to burn off. They hear sounds in the wild. Specifically, we're going to say a large bird call. And so they get some call and response between, they're clearly at least like two largish creatures, kind of talking to each other, kind of like that, calling each other. And so they're trying to figure that out. They don't really have an opportunity to see it, and they don't really like split up to like go investigate it or speed up like trying to run away from it or anything. They just kind of keep on keeping on until it's clear that the thing is coming closer, and they hear the thump 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 of it starting to move in their direction after it shoots a big burst of caustic fire, smashes into a tree beside them. Thump thumps. Charging in their direction. So what kind of happens here? Let's say, what do we want to call these? I mean, I can just call them what they are. This is the Strider encounter. So giant striders are a thing. You can look up the stat block if you want. They are kind of, I guess, they're. If you're familiar with axe beaks, they're very similar to axe beaks. They're kind of close to chocobos. So if you think about a lizardy chocobo, you're kind of on the right track. And then if you went lizardy chocobo that also breathes fire, then you've pretty much got it. That's about it. So there's a strider encounter. So they scatter and hide. And what was it? We'll just say where everybody is because that's going to be important, and then this is pretty much where we end the encounter. So they scatter and hide. I think Zarnak went behind a tree. Swain behind rock uses, I think, minor illusion. It's either minor illusion or disguise self. I think it was minor illusion to do his PETA impression. The guy from Hunger Games, if you don't know. So yeah, he's the guy who does that and kind of like uses minor illusion to kind of like gray himself up, kind of chameleon himself to the rock, and do that. And then Severin went under the boat. So they flip the boat over upside down and hides under it. And then he and I'll just say that yeah. So he and Caleb have a quick childlike, we'll say childlike argument of both trying to hide under the boat. Because Caleb gets in there, and it's very much like kids playing like hide and seek or something like that. Be like, find your own hiding spot. That kind of energy. But Caleb is able to sort of weasel his way in there, and they're both sort of under the hull of the boat as this thing's coming thump, 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 thump through the dregs of fog that are still kind of around and misty. Didn't know there was going to be fog here. I thought they would have clear sight on these creatures when we were going to have this encounter. But yeah, no, the Swain just happened to roll fog for the thing. So I was like, well, that's great for my my monsters. Maybe not so great for the party, who has a number of ranged people in it. Hey, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well, Raxus. We're hanging out, just finishing up because we're getting right at the end of what happened in our last session of D&D I was running. So yeah, they hide under the boat, and we have our sort of we have our Jurassic Park moment where the Strider comes in and pokes around the boat, and we roll initiative. That's sort of where we ended it. So yeah, with this thing kind of comes in and breaks through the mist. They can see it that it is this sort of ostrich-sized lizard, birdish. Looks like it's somewhere in the sort of dinosaur evolution where it's got its scales, but it does have sort of like this mohawk frill of dark feathers. And it's sort of in there and it's kind of kind of looking around and like starts pecking at the boat. And that's sort of where we left it off. So they are doing that, trying to get that Jurassic Park kind of energy where that, you know, they're trying to hide from this enemy and it's in there and it's trying to figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to attack this thing? And Swain pretty much just straight up says like, hey, when it comes to my turn, I'm definitely going to shoot this thing with a firebolt. So that's the plan, at least for one PC. I don't know what everybody else is going to do because Swain's not the first person. I think the Zarnok's going in front of him in the initiative. But they've had their long rest. They're fully healed up, so they should be able to sort of take on this encounter without too much issue. Fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But two of them are essentially trapped under this boat right now, with this big creature standing on top of it. Another thing that's going to be actually really difficult for Swain coming up in this fight. Swain only has one combat cantrip. I think he only has one combat spell at the moment, and that is Firebolt. Now, don't know this, but the giant striders are immune to fire damage. So he's about to have a real tough encounter where he's going to have to be real creative about what he can do. We're going to have to see some more minor illusion hijinks, things like that. Maybe throw in some help actions on people, some distractions, things like that, because his Firebolt is not going to do anything to this. Actually, giant striders are one of the few creatures that, in fact, they're immune to fire, and when they get hit with fire damage, they actually heal. So, that's interesting. So I did kind of, originally kind of pluck these giant striders kind of at random, and then as I learned more about them, I was like, oh, actually, these are the perfect creatures to use because they're fire stuff. So we're pushing more. Now that we're transitioning this campaign from being this sort of player-run one, which they weren't, we've had a couple of discussions about, and they weren't really sort of like taking the initiative to go and do their stuff. And again, this is why we're 10 sessions in and they're still level 1 is like, but because you guys haven't like gone off and like completed a quest and like found your path and done those things yet. So now we're transitioning more into sort of what we would consider probably today a modern D&D campaign kind of thing, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to lay out a plot for you guys. And we did a sort of input session at the very beginning, trying to ask, hey, what do you guys want out of the campaign? There's a little questionnaire filled out with some stuff. And the overwhelming response that I had gotten was that people wanted a player-run campaign rather than a sort of like GM or DM plot-driven campaign. But, we've played for a few months now, and that just hasn't really developed as we wanted it to. So, I'm pulling it sort of back into my domain, and I'll be taking that stuff over. So now stuff is just, it makes prep honestly a lot easier, because I can just like throw stuff at them, which is what we'll do. So this is the end of the session of that session. So let's take a look at what I had prepped for the session. So I knew that they were going to do this sort of overland hex crawling. Like I said, we're moving to more of this plot thing, so rather than have them sort of carve the path out, they have an NPC who's basically guiding them to their destination. So I know I just kind of rolled in between sessions to figure out what path they were going to take to get them to their destination. So I knew that they were going to do this overland hex crawling. They made it through kind of this much of the prep. So that's not quite 1/3 of it. So they made it through. They made it through 2 hexes. Just one hex didn't have anything in it. That was the first hex. But they got through here. The firelight flickering, the drums, and the chanting, the altar, the shining with blood, the bone knife, the screams of Mudsnake. Read their entrails from the live victim. So in God and the power of the established gods, they didn't really get it too much into that. And then they made it to Halameth Mountain, but that's it. So we're basically right here where the 2 giant striders charge down, shooting their fire burst. There's going to be an opportunity. Like I said, Swain is playing is a pyromancer. Yep, pyromancer. I saw pyroclast. He is an artificer. And so there's going to be an opportunity here for him to kind of do a little bit of crafting if he wants to do it. So if they take down these giant striders, they have the ability to remove their pyroclast glands, which is going to allow him to use a camp action to improvise a gland into an alchemist fire flask, if they want to. And if they decide to do that. But I am going to give them the options. Then they'll go back. So yeah, I really don't need to prep anything for next time, because I'm basically just going to capture the rest of this, and that means that the prep time that I do earn back in this week when I'm prepping for next week, for this week prepping for the next game, there we go, I'll spend it working on this little guy, which is the dungeon they're about to get to, which I've only done about, I guess I've done about half of. I just need to finish it out and figure out the monsters for it. I think I need to make at least 1 monster for it, maybe 2. Some sort of homebrew custom monsters, just to keep things sweet and tidy and fun and unexpected. But yeah, I mean, that's it. So doing the prep for next session is pretty much done. I don't really have to do much at all. What I'm going to do is I'll just go ahead and take this, and I think we've got our session 10, and we'll just load it up. How about that? So we'll take out everything to here. Let's look at our thing here. Alright, let's make us a new subtab. This will be how the time flies. It's funny because the other dungeon master in our group was just telling us at the beginning of the session that they were getting bit by the DM bug again, now that they haven't run for, I guess, about 3 months. They're like, oh, I'm ready to start DMing. And I think it also helps that they're jumping into a Daggerheart campaign as a player. And I think that's sort of like gotten those juices going again for them. So I think they're interested in doing that because they got the new and shinies with a new toy to play with, which is Daggerheart. Alright, so this is going to be session 10. It's going to be Friday, which is June 6th? Yeah. 6/6. Right, it is technically... No, it's technically still the same day? Yeah, it's technically still the same day. We're going to update our folk here, because we know that they are now planting spring grain. We're going to leave the weather the same, because we didn't do anything with the weather this time, so we're going to kind of leave that the same. And it's the same day. So they've done their rations checks. And they still have 6 days until the festival. Everybody is not on active con saves again. So our con save DCs have reset because they had an extended rest. And so we're going to set this back down at 0-1 because that's what I rolled. So 0-2. Makes it what, 0-5? What was it? 12, right? 7, 10, 11, 13. Not that I necessarily need those, but they're nice to have. So, overland hex crawling. So we need to get rid of these Oracle Maker runes because we finished all of that. And then, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's all I need to do. I guess we can get rid of this. We can get rid of this foreshadowing. And I'll also do things like I'll go back up here on the prep and timers and do all this stuff. Where I work on some of that stuff, but I don't need to do that right now. That's really boring stuff that's not interesting for me to watch. It's mainly me rolling a die and being like, making a note. Not particularly interesting. But that is the last session and everything, and my session prep for next session, which makes things real easy. So I can work more on specifically on the dungeon that I'm working on, which let me pull it up. Do I have anything for this? Let me see if this is worth even looking at this point. Yeah, yeah, we can look at it real quick. Just a little bit. Let me get this up to fit. That way you guys can see it. There we go. So Golden Groff. 1 to 3 session underground bunker for average party level 1, first level PCs. So they have the prospectors for the gold. They're going to go in that. They're going to jump in. They're going to follow that. They can find out some flakes of gold and follow that trail. That'll lead them to a place where they can either... It's going to be too tight for them to get into, because if they had a small creature in their party, they'd be able to sneak through. But they don't have any small-sized creatures in their party, none of the player characters. And they our missing player, who's sort of in cardboard cutout on the side right now, is our druid, who could maybe do something, or talk to an animal or something, but not able to do that. But there is a way for them to get in. They can either take the time to clean up the tunnel of debris in which they can get in, which they'll check for a random encounter or against exhaustion. There's also an underwater entrance they can get in through, which they'll be able to hear the lapping of water, and I'll let them intuit that means that there's another way that they can get into, presumably through the nearby marsh. So they can do that. There's we got a little puzzle. Not really puzzles, really more of a trap. With some golden beams in the golden eye beams and the visages of the gods. There's the underwater passage that they can go in through. There's the old Hagen cap, which is in the old armory. A skeleton in the ointment, that's going to be a really interesting encounter. Dark Stormy Waters, also an interesting encounter where we have some chaos magic shenanigans going on. Skeleton in the ointments, this weird, greasy sebum thing. It's a gross room. It's a pool filled with what's like skin like oil and almost like waxy, like sebum, almost like an earwax kind of substance. It's very gross, and there's a skeleton that's in it. They can investigate, and there's some shenanigans that can happen. There's some loot they can find. Same thing with the Stormy Waters. There's an area that they can get into that's just got dark water. There's some stuff in the water. But the chaos magic is flinging the debris around, sort of like a whirlwind tornado of debris that's in this room. That's just a hazard that they're going to take damage through if they have to get through. So either they need to find out a way to get through the air which they'll take some damage through to get through the air to get to the other side of the room, or they have to go down into like the inky black water, and they're not going to be able to see, and they're going to have to figure out what's maybe under there that could maybe do something to them. There's a hall and dormitory that's got some undead in there and some stuff they can find in there, and that's about where I've gotten to. So I've got a few more rooms I need to fill out, and then we'll be done with it. I think we got the sentry post that's coming up, and what else do we have? Oh, the commander suite. Yeah. And the commander suite. So that's stuff for them to figure out, and then I'll have to have my little custom monster in there. That's going to be kind of our boss monster for this. They fight got some koipu in there, so they've got some like nutria, gross water rat vermin things to fight, and all sorts of fun stuff in this thing. They'll also find out more once they get there. It's gonna be real obvious that hey, this is clearly not a mine. So the gold, there's still gold in there, and they can get gold, but it's not going to be what they think it's going to be because Japheth was ill-informed. And I think that's pretty much it for this. So I do want to spend sort of the last little bit of our time here, the last hour or so. I'm going to take a short break and refill up my coffee and stuff. But once we get back, I do want to talk about. Do I have it up? Can I pull it up? I want to talk about a little game called Ironsworn. And I need to switch the workspace. So we need to switch the workspace on this. Window capture. It's going to go. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about Ironsworn. If you're not familiar with Ironsworn, I'll let you know. Hey, you can download not just like a quick start. You can download this entire PDF that's on screen for free. You can go over to the URL I know redirects. It's ironswornrpg.com. I think it's Tomkin Press. Sean Tomkin, the person who made Ironsworn. And you can download this whole PDF for free, and this is legit, like all the rules of the game. Like it's the full thing. And I'm going to bring it up, and we'll talk about why I'm bringing it up now. It is a game I've played before. But like I said, I'm going to take that quick break, refill my coffee. We'll be back in a minute, so hang on. And I'll see you guys in just a minute. Alright? Bye-bye. Alright, let's go ahead and bring it back. Bring it back. Okie doke. So I said that we wanted to talk a little bit about a little game called Ironsworn. Let's get something different. Now that we're done talking about marsh stuff, let's mix up our soundscape a little bit, eh? What do we want? What do we want? We want something I think suitably Viking-esque. What does this sound like? Let's see. Alright, yeah, no, I think that works. I think that's suitably Vikinger. Alright, so Ironsworn. Let me pull this stuff back up. Move this over here. No! No! Fighting with windows. Do the thing that I want you to do! I don't know why this is open. Let's get that open for anything. Oh. That's why I had it open. That's why I had it open. Because I need that document. That's why I need to have it open. You close the things you need, and you need the things you close. Let's do this. Alright. Alright, let's take a look. And like I said, let's pull this back up so you guys can see this thing. So, this is Ironsworn. Like I said, you can get it for free, this entire PDF that we have. I guess you can't see my mouse. That's okay. It's PDF. You'll get the idea. Let me see, can I zoom this out a little bit? I want to make sure that you guys can see it pretty well. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, we'll keep it that way. So, Ironsworn, a tabletop RPG of perilous quests by Tomkin. So, Ironsworn is sort of like an independent TTRPG, originally published in 2018 by the titular Tomkin. And it's primarily constructed as sort of a solo TTRPG, but you can also play it GM-less co-op, so if you and one plus other friend also want to play some sort of TTRPG, and neither one of you want to be like the GM or Dungeon Master, you can use something like Ironsworn here to do that. And you guys can both play. The same way that you can really play just about any solo RPG with more than one person, as long as it's got some sort of rules for doing things like making combat encounters for more than one person. That sort of thing. So, that's pretty much it. It's the best way to kind of describe it, I think, is that it's got this it's an evocative kind of like narrative forward TTRPG. It's definitely what we would call a story first kind of game, or what I would consider a story first game. Like, it's not a completely willy-nilly story game, but it is very much a narrative forward game. And it's set in this sort of low fantasy, winter is coming, Viking-esque world that has really kind of soft magic. So there's very light rules. It's more of a vibe for how magic operates and scales, leaning on the sort of the narrative aspect of the game rather than giving you things like in D&D style, like this is your casting time, this is the school, these are the components you need, this is the specifics of what the spell does, and how many spells you can cast in a day, and that sort of thing. So it doesn't have as much of that. Also, magic for use for player characters is not particularly common. It's as common, I should say, like a lot of things in Ironsworn, it's about as common as you want it to be. But the vibe is very much like it's not very common. Like, the magic is weird and not necessarily a human kind of thing. This is also, Ironsworn is very much a human-centric tabletop RPG. So you're going to play as a human. I don't think there are any rules for playing as firstborn races, though I could be wrong. I just don't remember seeing any. Maybe that's in one of the supplements. It may be in one of its many supplements. Or somebody's made some homebrew rules, or a player kit for it, or something. I don't know. I do know that I've never tried to play as an elf or a giant or what are they, the vol something. What are they called? NPCs in the Irelands. Yeah, come on. Common folks, the firstborn, there we go. The giants, primordials, trolls, Varu, that's what they are. The Varu. That's who I was thinking of. Alright, anyways. Go back here. But, yeah, so I don't know if there's any rules to play for that. I haven't done it, but I'm sure somebody's probably helped make some rules for it. But the general understanding is that you will be playing as humans. And I think that things like this art, like even the cover does a very good illustration of the kind of vibe that this is going for. It's like, oh, this is going to be like a tough, unforgiving land. You are very much, you're an Ironsworn, which means like you're kind of an adventurer that makes vows to do deeds, kind of thing. There's very much a focus on heroes who swear oaths to kind of defend the common folk and right wrongs. And it's more like that rather than something like a DnDAdventure where oftentimes the reward is just gold for doing things or some other type of treasure. Ironsworn also has a lot of different expansions and sort of sister products. There's Starforged, which is Ironsworn but sci-fi. There is Sundered Isles, which is Ironsworn but pirates. And there's some other ones. I think the other big one that jumps to mind is Delve, which is its own product for running dungeon delves. Because Ironsworn off the cuff, like off the start, is not about delving dungeons. It's about dealing with very I guess rather if you think of dungeons being like underworld problems, these are like very overworld problems. Like you need to go to places and do things. It's more of a Viking saga kind of story and less a dungeon crawl. I don't think there's really any support whatsoever in the original product, in the first product, for dealing with anything that resembles a dungeon. There's not even really a lot of rules for doing things like fighting inside, but there's not that many rules for fighting in general. So there's a lot of different things. So if you're interested, first of all, if anything that I've said so far sounds interesting and you're on board, just go pick it up. Like I said, you can go to ironswornrpg.com, which will redirect, I think, to Tomkin Press, which I think is the official website now, where you can pick up the free Complete Rules PDF. This is the PDF that we're looking at. Completely free, you can pick that up. And that is how I first encountered Ironsworn. So I just played Ironsworn again, but the first time that I got it, I think was back in 2018. I think it might have been even before the full PDF, this PDF had been put together. I think it might have been looking at what was a prototype for it. Because I don't remember it being quite as fleshed out as this when I was looking at it. Or maybe it was like a quick start rules when they were still kind of... Sean Tomkin was still kind of building stuff up. I can't remember. It's been a few years. Those were the before times. So I don't remember that too much about it. I remember my feelings on it, and we'll talk about it. But I think if you're interested at this point, just go play it. It's fun. You can sit down, spend an hour or so just kind of looking through the rules, and you can just play it. You probably don't even need to look through the rules for an hour if you're already familiar with things like the Powered by the Apocalypse engine. Those style of games, then you're going to pick up Ironsworn pretty quickly. If you're not familiar with those games, then it might take a little longer. And that was definitely where I feel like I stumbled on it when I was the first time I tried to encounter Ironsworn, because I wasn't very familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse games. Now I'm more familiar with that. I've played in a Dungeon World campaign for a while, and so I was more familiar with that. I guess the entire campaign. I played the entire campaign, and so I became more familiar with that. And once I was more familiar with sort of like the setup and how that game system works, and seeing other people work with that system as well as a game master, I had a much better understanding, I feel like, going into Ironsworn this second time than I did. I would say, like, if you're interested in playing and you want to get some more advice about doing that, I would say check out some YouTube videos. I would point you towards Me, Myself, and Die, Season 2 of his solo RPG series, in which he uses Ironsworn specifically for that, however many is, like 8-10 episodes, something like that, series. And he's playing Ironsworn in that. So if you want to see how it plays, you can literally watch somebody play it. I would also say The Bad Spot, which is another YouTube channel. He does more of an audio podcast, and so you're not going to see as much like the rolling and that sort of stuff, which might be helpful. Me, Myself, and Die is going to show you more of that stuff. But Bad Spot really, I think, showcases the narrative aspect of it. So if you're trying to get into these games very much as the story first, which is going to be very helpful, because Ironsworn very much bills itself as a fiction mechanics fiction game, which is like you go as far telling the story as you can until you hit a point where the mechanics jump in. You resolve the mechanics and you go right back into the fiction. So it's more of a story with game elements rather than a game with story elements almost. But yeah, I would recommend watching a how to play or maybe a system primer for Dungeon World or another Powered by the Apocalypse game, Apocalypse World, etc. There are a few others. You can go find them and watch some of those sessions and some primers on those, because that's going to help you kind of understand the style of play a lot better. So, especially if you're planning on playing as the GM with a group, or maybe multiple of you playing together in a co-op way without a GM, I think it would be very helpful to watch something like a Dungeon World playthrough, where you can see how the system works with more than one person at the table. So let's talk about sort of the physical components of Ironsworn. So I did say that I had played Ironsworn many years ago. Getting up to 10 years ago. Wow, can you believe it? And so why am I talking about it now? I found that the original version of the rules difficult for me to grok. Like, I didn't really get them. Like I said, I wasn't familiar yet with the design lineage of Powered by the Apocalypse. That would have helped me, I think, fill in some of the gaps here, where you're looking at something like this and you're going, I don't quite get what they're trying to do, because I only have this very narrow sliver of experience, which is black and white text on the page, trying to understand what it's doing. So there were parts of that I was like, it's kind of difficult. So now that I've had that sort of background, it does make... I kind of bounced off of it, but now that I've come back to it, having played another Powered by the Apocalypse engine game, I feel like I had a much better handle on it. The thing that I think I struggle with these games is that you can't make it more than what it is. Sometimes I want the mechanics to be more with these games. Like, I'm playing a game, so I want the mechanics of the game to be there. Like, I want the capital G in the RPG. Like, I want the game aspect too. Otherwise, I'm just kind of telling the story to myself, and it's like I don't really need like a big book to do that, a 250-page PDF to do that. Like, if I just to roll some dice to figure something out, because and I think that's where I struggled with it originally, is I was like, it felt like the game was kind of like getting in the way of the story at the same time. But I think that's just my experience. I think other people have different experiences with it. I think that's an issue that is a specifically me thing. And it might be you, or it might not be you. So if you like very story-heavy, story-forward games, I'd say check it out. It's probably going to be your kind of thing. I tend to not like those as much. I want the mechanics to help me tell the tale, not be sort of like a condiment for my story. A topping, if you will, for that. But another reason I'm bringing it up now is because my friend just gifted me these bad boys, which are Ironsworn and Ironsworn Delve. So Delve is the one that I said is the dungeon crawling supplement, but this is the same thing, the same PDF we're looking at. As you can see, it's about 250 pages. Both of these books are about 250 pages, which is kind of chunky. I like the form factor. Form factor looks good. Art's good. It's a both of them are nice. They are print on demand, which the quality can always kind of be kind of a crapshoot. You never quite know what you're going to get with these. I can say that the quality is quite good. Like I can still tell when I pick it up that like this. Oh yeah, this is a print on demand book, but not in a pejorative way. Not in the like ugh. It's a print on demand book. It's like I can tell, but it's still good. It's still good quality. Now, if you buy it, and will you get a good quality one? I don't know. I don't know. I've had experiences both ways. So, but I felt like it was a good time to do it, and we had a nice long weekend here in the U.S. and I had the fresh new book that my friend had just given me, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna sit down and mess around with this since I had some free time. And so that's what I did. So I thought after I did it, I would give sort of my impressions on it, and we talk a little bit about it. So let's keep moving on. So like I said, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the physical aspect of the book as well, and using it. Since that's not something that I could have talked about previously. So I do wish in this one there was sort of like some bookmark ribbons, which are always a nice addition, but they're well made. They come. There's also another thing I would have liked, and this shows up in, like, I believe Starbound has this, as well as the Sundered Isles, which is the pirate book. There's an option for a spiral bound book, which I think I would have really appreciated, because I would notice that I found myself doing a lot of page flipping back and forth, and I would have preferred to be able to take this book when I'm trying to reference it and being able to lay it flat, especially when it's a big book like this. And so I'd be able to at least reference 2-page spreads and then have those bookmarks, especially in those sections that you flip back and forth for, like where the moves and stuff are written down, where you need to, or where the oracles are, where you're flipping back and forth a whole bunch. I think that would have been a little bit more useful. Otherwise, the book itself is fine. I'm just saying there's room for improvement on them as well. As well as a thing that's very common in sort of like the OSR space would be to you use the interior of the cover in these interior pages, typically for charts. So I would have liked if like maybe the Oracle charts were there. Like Oracle 1 and Oracle 2 were on the back and front and back cover, which would have made rolling on them really easy. Or maybe like make a vow, some of those big quest moves, the sort of things that you do all the time. Would have been nice to have, instead of, because the oracles are, I don't know if you can see my bookmark here, but the oracles are like almost smack dab in the middle of the book, which is not the easiest spot, I think, to reference it, starting on page 174 in this book. So 174 of 250. So pretty close to the middle. So, and I think there's some stuff. I do think, I don't think that the layout itself is great. Like I said, there's a lot of flipping back and forth. There were many times I went to go look up a very specific thing, and I'd get a page, and it would tell me to reference another page for that thing. I'd go to that second page, and then sometimes that page would even tell me to reference a third page for that thing. So oftentimes I was kind of jumping from page to page just to look things up that were in a different section than where I was reading, where it told me to go look, which is not the greatest. It did kind of bring me back to some PTSD kind of flashbacks of trying to use the World of Darkness books as a rules reference. The World of Darkness books are great books to sit down and read. To use as a reference while you're playing the game, they are not fun or easy to use. Similarly, the information in World of Darkness books, as I kind of found in Ironsworn, is kind of peppered all throughout. So there's things where it's like, hey, how do I make this move? You go to the thing about making moves, and it tells you to go to this different section to look for this different section about this specific move. And that might send you to another section that explains more about that, and it's just... I think that some of this could have been tamped down a little bit. Could be revised a little bit more. Could be put together a little bit in a more natural way, instead of having to, looking through bonds, showing up in like 3 different sections, having all the stuff about the bonds in one section might be a little bit easier. And having that be like the page number that pulls up in the back and sort of the index to make referencing a little bit easier. But I think the art is, all the art kind of looks like this. We can find some more art pieces. Come on. Hello. There we go. Let's find some more art. Like, everything on the interior is all black and white. You've got this very sort of stylized photography that's mixed with kind of a mixed media digital effects, but also with this sort of black and white style. I think it does a good job giving it this sort of ethereal, otherworldly feel. I think that it has this kind of dreamy aspect to it that I think really reinforces the low fantasy vibes of it really nice. It does kind of have this look when I look at it. It makes me think of those pulp, like 80s movies, fantasy movies, the like super cheap, like Canon Films kind of stuff, all the way up to things like Conan the Barbarian and stuff. The kind of pulpy stuff that was not super high production value for the most part. They're kind of a little cheesy. But it is oftentimes kind of scenes like this. Then you have like nice atmospheric shots like this that, just looking at mountains, stuff like this. So, I mean, there's lots of cool stuff in here. So I think that really does it. And another thing that I don't believe I came across I couldn't remember coming across any typos or misspellings, and that's, I think, extremely rare, especially in a self-published TTRPG book. So I think that job's done very well. I think that the hierarchy, the typography of everything works out really well. It's really easy to read. Everything jumps off the pages. Everything's very clear and concise. Maybe not as stylistic as something like the new D&D books, where they have like a ton of art in them and stuff. But things are broken up really well. The text is nice and big. And you got these little sidebar boxes and text boxes that break stuff up really easy. Also, good use of bolding and italics to help you do stuff. Lots of page numbers in here that help. So, I think all that stuff's really helpful. So, like, here's a good... Where was it? It was good. Like, even stuff like the suffer moves is kind of stuff what I'm talking about. Where it's like, okay, I need to look up a suffer move. And so you go to this heading, and this heading actually just tells you to go to different pages that have that. Now, in this case, they're like within a few pages, so it's pretty easy. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's they might tell you to do go somewhere else, or roll on an oracle, and then you have to flip to the oracle section and do that stuff. So there's stuff that's like, it's a little bit more cumbersome when I don't have it internalized to kind of look up this stuff. That could have been made a little bit easier, I feel like. So how do you kind of like play this game? You might be wondering at this point. All right, yep, that's a fair question, right? That's pretty fair. We should probably talk about that. So again, Ironsworn kind of builds itself as this fiction mechanics, fiction game, which you're going to spend 2/3 of your time just kind of drafting the story and detailing the things that happen in the story, and about 1/3 of the time you should be kind of doing the mechanics of the game. So for a solo game, there might be a lot of, depending on how you play solo games, there might be a lot of just sitting here going, or furiously typing at the keyboard, or writing notes down as you sort of draft the story while you're going along. And then you're drafting the story, and be like, that's definitely a move. You put down your pen or whatever and pick up some dice and start rolling to resolve that. That's kind of how the game is played. So if you're playing it with more than one person, you're going to have most of the time you're going to just be spent in conversation, talking about what's happening with your friends, which is not necessarily bad. And it's got this very sort of like relaxed kind of feel. They're perilous quests, so the tone maybe doesn't fit it, but the play of it's very relaxed, generally. So, so because this is a Powered by the Apocalypse, it's not officially that, but it is based off of that. Anything that you're doing in this is considered a move. That's what we were talking about over here. You do these things called moves, which is chapter 3. So everything you do is move, and the move kind of represents something that's kind of like an ability, or just a general action that you take. The idea is that there's going to be some consequence for anything less than a complete success. And so they kind of come in three flavors: strong hit, weak hit, and miss, which is very, very much like the Powered by the Apocalypse system way. You're going to be spending most of your time making weak hits, which means that you're going to accomplish what you're trying to do, but usually at some cost to yourself. And that is sort of this central nougat where those kind of games just live. That's where you're going to spend most of your time. That's one of the things that I struggle with these kind of games, is that I don't like personally as a player, that I feel like that when out of three options, there's miss, but still. So there's miss, there's hit, but at some consequence, and then strong hit, which is just a baseline success across the board. And it feels like successes are very, very difficult to get, which means that I feel like I spend a lot of my time when I'm playing these games failing. Feels very often like I'm taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back with the game, which I find kind of tedious and plodding. It makes me feel as a game that builds itself as being like heroes as the main characters, feels to me less heroic. Like I don't mind it, but I do feel this is the thing that I struggle with, and and a lot of oracles also use this kind of system. And so this was a reason why I was like, I'm going to make my own oracle, because I don't like having like over 50% of my stuff feel like you make progress, but then there's some sort of consequence or obstacle or a new development, or it just has this sort of spiraling effect. If you play it, you'll probably understand what I mean, as things just kind of get messy and spiral out of control. It never feels like, even when you're in control, like narratively in control of the game, that you're necessarily really in control. That might be hard to grok if you aren't not used to playing a lot of solo games, but once you start playing it, you may see that. And that will determine what kind of games you want to play, is how you feel about that feeling. So let's talk sort of about the specifics. So moves are the things that you do, and they propel you usually back into the fiction. They're like your little stop off for the mechanics, your pit stop for mechanics, and then you get back into the narrative of what's going on until something else comes up that would be a move. And like I said, these are kind of close to abilities, but there's usually the moves are really straightforward usually. So fiction first, then move. Not everything is a move. Make moves matter. Like, if you're trying to do something very simple, that's not a move. Again, a move is something that you want there to be some sort of consequence for failure. It's sort of like the same way that if you're running something like D&D as a dungeon master, where you're like, should I call for a roll on this? Is this important? Is there any consequence for failure? If the answer to those questions is like no, or I need them to get this information, or be able to get past this door, or else the adventure doesn't continue, then don't roll for it. They just do it. So that's the same sort of situation like this. Like, you would be like, well, that's not a move. I don't want that to be a move, because I want them to just be able to do it because they need to do it. Or it's not notable enough. They're group moves, and so there are moves and there are progress moves. We'll get into that a little bit. Progress moves are about tracking experience as you go through an adventure, your progression on an adventure. Equipment's very like non-existent, really. It's all a narrative thing. Now you do have gear, which is represented by supplies. Initiative is more of a narrative thing rather than our initiative. Here we go. Here are some moves. So face danger is one of the common moves you'll be going through. So adventure moves are used as you travel the Ironlands, investigate situations, and deal with threats. Face danger is one of the most common ones you'll do. If you're not trying to kill something, you'll do it a lot in combat. If you're just trying to dodge or get out of the way or trying to do some other action, often when you are not in control of the situation, you don't have the initiative in the situation, you'll do a lot of face dangers. Secure an advantage. That's anything that you do narratively. You make up a way in which you can get an advantage. Like the current character I'm playing right now has a thing where they get an extra bonus if they use like crafting arrows as a secure and advantage for a situation, if it makes narrative sense. So in the session I was playing, I was like, oh, well, I know that the idea is that coming up that they're gonna probably have to get attacked by one of these scold boats. So in preparation for that, to secure an advantage, they're going to make some fire arrows. Be like, okay, so they do that, and so I get the extra bonus because I secured that advantage and that was successful. Because I think my character's aspect's fate. I was talking about those yesterday with somebody. No, I just lost my mind. What are these things called? I'll look at these because these cards over here. They're not aspects. Man, I completely zoned out on that. Man, what? I do not remember what they're called. It's not that important. We're gonna talk about character creation. Vowels, abilities, conditions, assets. They're called assets, not aspects. I knew it was very similar. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to do most of the specific stuff you're going to be doing. You're going to be like facing the danger. You're going to be gathering information is another big one. Undertaking a journey, or doing some of the combat moves once you get into there, where it's like, oh, draw the circle, or which kind of helps, or some of the other ones that determine your initiative, and then you're clashing or striking, or doing something to give you advantage in the fight, or running away, or which is usually a face danger, I think, move if you're trying to just run away. So what is the core mechanic? So the core mechanic of the game is you're essentially going to roll 3 different types of dice. So let's get back here. What you need? Let's see if they'll show us. So that's what the character sheet looks like. Just FYI. They're very simple. In fact, you can't even put everything on this character sheet that your character has. Like I said, you're not going to be able to put those assets come in these little cards, which is a thing to remember. If you're going to play this game, you're going to have to print out and cut out these guys, or buy them, or make a note on them somewhere, because your character sheet, the ones that they provide, don't allow any space to record your assets as you play, which I think is a bit of an oversight. I'd rather have that than, honestly, the vowels probably in the middle, because after you fulfill a few vowels, the front of that sheet is going to be absolutely useless. So I would have preferred to have the assets in there, and then maybe have the vowels on the back. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But you are going to need to print out these cards. I would suggest printing them out. Or you can buy them, but I would suggest printing them out. It helps to have the physical representation. One of the things that this character sheet does do that I really like, and I'm not even sure they talk about it. No, they do. They do somewhere in the book. Is that you'll notice that you have these tracks on sort of the right side of the page and the left side of the page. You can actually take, I think I've got one. Where is she? Ah, here she is. Even though I've got other pages here, you're not going to be able to do this. You can take a paper clip and use paper clips to track your like health and momentum and stuff, and that's really cool. So instead of like filling in boxes and erasing and filling in boxes and erasing and tearing through the paper, you can actually just use a little paper clip along the side to track the stuff. Have a handful of paper clips to do that, which I thought was a really cool thing. And that also works on the asset cards too. Some of the asset cards, you need to have little tracks on them that you need to track, and you can also use paper clips on them. That way you're not consistently like filling in boxes and scratching stuff out and rubbing through it, so those cards and those character sheet will last a long time. Except for the vowels on the front, I suppose. So the core mechanic is very, very simple. And can you show it to me? I thought they were going to show me the dice. There they are. So this is going to be the roll. So pretty much for any move that you make, most of the time you're going to roll 3 dice. You're always going to roll at least the 2d10. But most of the time you'll roll this action dice, which is you making an action. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes these numbers are set against your progress. or your bond, or some other track, one of your tracks that you're filling out, which is how you fulfill vows and inquests. But otherwise, it's very simple. So these 2d10 that you're going to roll, it's not a d100, it's 2d10, and they set the DC range for anything you try to do. So the DCs are always randomized, which is both really great and really awful. That means that things that you think that you should be really good at, sometimes you just roll 2 10s on the dice and you just fail. Even if it's something that you put a lot of points into and you have a bunch of stuff to do and you're like, oh, I've got momentum I can spend on it. This should be a slam dunk, no look slam dunk. And the DCs just screw you over with that. So that to me kind of takes me out of the fiction a little bit when I think, oh, this should be something that my character's very good at. There's not really any consequences that I can see that's going to make this situation any more difficult. I think this should be an easy win. I'm leaning into something I'm already strong at, and then a bad die roll can end up hurting you a bunch. It's part of the system. And so it's one thing to keep around that Ironsworn does differently, is that the DC is always randomized on whatever you're trying to do. Now it is very simple. Then you roll an action die, which is a d6 most of the time. You add your stat. There are 5 stats. We'll go over them in a second. And add any situational modifiers, and that'll give you your total. Now, Ironsworn is a beat system, not a meet or beat system, so you have to beat the numbers on these dice. If you beat one of the numbers on the dice, like say in this situation, we'll use the situation they have here, right? They beat the 4. 6 is higher than 4, but it's not higher than 8. If they had rolled an 8 on the action score, they would still be in the same situation. They would have to roll at least a 9 or better, which they could only do in this situation by rolling a 6 on that action die. At that point, they would have gotten a full success. Like I said, you're just going to spend most of your time in those weak hit areas, which is where you are having a result that's greater than one of the dice, but not greater than both of the dice, which means you're going to accomplish what you're trying to do, but there is usually some sort of setback that you're getting out of it, or some sort of consequence or harm that you take as in the process of performing this action. So that's basically just explaining what happened there. There's also matches. So matches are essentially when you roll the same number twice, which just basically heightens the stakes. So because you'll never get a weak hit, you'll either only get a success or a failure, and so you just kind of lean into that. Here they say, oh, this is a place to trigger adding a twist or creating a new complication or mixing things up. It's just you make the situation a little extra, a little more dire, a little bit more, provide more of a boon or a bane or a twist on the situation. Something is different about the situation, or the stakes are elevated in some way. Both for good and for bad. So if you beat it, you get some extra good stuff. If you don't beat it, you get some extra bad stuff, or something weird happens, and you have to figure that out. So that's it for the core mechanic. And in addition to that, you have basically 4 things that you'll be tracking. Let me get back to this character sheet. I'll make this a little bit larger so you guys can see it. So on the right, you'll see that you have health, you have spirit, and you have supply. And those are the 3 things you're kind of taking care of most of the time that you're trying to track. They're pretty self-explanatory. Your health is your physical health. Your spirit is sort of your mental fortitude. You're taking stress, trauma, mental trauma, those sorts of things. You're dealing with that in spirit, keeping morale up, things of that nature. Despondency is what you're fighting against. And then supply is your abstracted just gear that you have. It's usually some sort of, it's your rations, it's your rope, it's your torches, it's all that stuff. All that stuff is just supply. It's all just rolled into supply. And so most often when you're going to be spending supply, or at least that's been my experience, most of the time I'm spending supply when I'm undertaking a journey, which is just to represent, you eat your rations, you drink water out of your water skin, you have to cut up your rope to do something while you're trying to traverse this rugged hinterlands. And so then there are actions you can take to resupply, things like that. You can hunt, you can make rope, and do all sorts of stuff like that. Bloodthirsty got a chat. Well. Look who we got here. Yeah, so I mean, that's it. And then on the left side we have momentum. And momentum is an interesting mechanic. So momentum is somewhat closer to, if you've seen systems that are like kids on bikes or stuff like that, where you get motes, usually when you fail, you get like a little bonus. Ironsworn does that too. That's what momentum is. Except momentum you generally only get when you succeed rather than fail. So it kind of flips things on its head. So the more you succeed over situations, the more momentum it is that you're likely to gather. Momentum's really great. You want momentum, because momentum, just as a very visual way, you could look at it and be like, how successful am I being in this quest? If you have high momentum, you're being very successful. You're rolling really well. And it makes you feel, it's an indicator of how much control you have over the adventure, which is a way to sort of abstractly look at that. Momentum's also great because momentum does this thing where we can, let's hop down. So, you know how I said here that you need to beat these dice? So let's say we had a momentum of, let's say 8. In this situation, not helpful. So you're able to spend your momentum, you completely reset it, and every die result that's under that number on the d10s gets canceled out. So in this situation, if you had an 8, it would cancel out this 4. Don't really need to use it because that wouldn't change the results. If I had a 9 on momentum, I could burn that momentum to turn this weak hit into a strong hit, which is very useful in some situations. Usually it's used to either turn a miss into a weak hit or a weak hit into a strong hit. So you either want to be completely successful or ensure that you make at least some sort of success towards the end. There are a few situations in which you cannot spend momentum. Most of those are progress moves, which are the moves in which you're not rolling the action die. So I don't think that that's technically the official ruling, but in most circumstances, if you're rolling the action die, you can burn momentum. If you're not rolling the action die, you're probably not going to be able to burn momentum on that roll. You're going to have to, because you're checking against the progress track. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, we're just talking about some Ironsworn that I've been playing recently. Ooh. Kind of talking about it as we finish up the stream. So there is another thing that you also have on there, like I talked about, and that is assets. That's another resource you have at your fingertips. There's I can just grab this one because this is the player I was playing, and they do have some assets. Even though these are going to be too small and you cannot see them. I have this guy I'm specifically playing has the Fletcher background that or asset that we just talked about. He also has the Commander asset, which means that he has a warband with him. That's right, and they go up to +4, and so they work very much like any of the other supply tracks. As they fail and they take harm, that gets reduced down. There's ways to get more people into your warband, but these are really useful. And a lot of the assets, the way that you choose, or at least that I choose assets, is to cover up weaknesses. And I'll tell you, as somebody who is now been blooded in the Powered by the Apocalypse style of gameplay, it has this kind of annoying, I find it annoying as a player personally, is that because only players make moves, the GM was never going to roll dice, they're never going to do anything against you. It's pretty much always the players who are taking the fiction and always determining what rolls they want to make, or doing things in which will result in moves that are rolls. So, because the way the DCs are set up, it's very, very difficult to succeed on things you're not good at. Whereas in a game like D&D, well, a D20 is just a flat spectrum. Everybody has a chance to roll high on it, so you have the old, like, you know, sorcerer or wizard, like, lifts up the portcullis because they roll really well. They roll a natural 20 on their strength check, even though they've got a -1 to their strength. They're still able to do it. So that kind of gameplay is very fun. This gameplay is kind of cleaves towards being, we call it more realistic, in that you're more likely to succeed on the things you're good at, and you're pretty unlikely to succeed on the things that you're not good at. So with that in mind, it really kind of creates a style of play where you often only want to roll things you're good at, and you'll actually avoid doing things that you're not very good at, because generally that's failure, which means you're going to take some sort of harm, which is going to hurt your character in a very bad way, or is going to create some new obstacle or new twist to what you're trying to accomplish. It basically makes everything more complicated if you fail, usually. So you really want to avoid failure. So choosing companions or choosing your assets, sometimes you look for things like the companions, like this kindred, who also has, like the commander, is another person that's like an NPC who's with you, one or more NPCs that's with you, and you can use them. You can have them aid you in moves, or you can just have them go make moves. So when there's things that you're not good at, so the first character I was playing with over the weekend, I decided not to make a combat-focused character. And man, getting into combats was real rough. And I didn't choose assets that were going to be helpful to help me with combat. So my butt got kicked a lot in combat, to the point where I was often using face danger to avoid combat. And it wasn't until I was able to pick up some experience and get one of the things, which was like the shadow walk power or whatever, because I had a very high sneak character, high shadow character, as it's called in the game. Is that status called in the game, which allowed me to get a really cool advantage that whenever I was doing something like attacking from the shadows or something, I could re-roll any of the dice after I rolled it. So if I rolled a 1 on the action die, I could re-roll the action die. If I rolled a 10 on one of the d10s, I could re-roll that d10 and hope for a lower number. And so that really changes your chance of success in that situation. And then it plays into, it's like, well, of course, every opportunity possible, this guy's going to be sneaking around, so that way he can get the drop on somebody in combat and do this. Which is very much sort of even though it's got its own mechanic, it is very much just a secure advantage kind of move. But yeah, but the assets themselves are their way. There is also an asset that's like it's like a treasure hunter or whatever it is, which actually gives you wealth as one of the things you can use. And you can use wealth to like resupply. You can use it to, I think you can, in some instances, you can use it in social roles, if you try to representing you like paying people off or bribing people, doing things like that, which is really cool. Doing the resupply, but every time that you swear a vow, which is basically their version of like saying yes to take on a quest, you ensure that, hey, I'm getting paid for that quest. And so if you want more of a D&D style, we do quests for money, it kind of behooves you that everybody you're playing with have that asset. So I'd almost say if you were going to do that, maybe just give them that asset for free, so that way they can still have their normal character, or maybe you just assume the asset is like this weird group asset that everybody shares, which actually might be an easier way to do it if you're a GM and you just keep track of the card, or if you're playing without a GM and you're all just playing co-op, you could all just like set it out in the middle of the table or something and do it that way, so everybody has access to the same thing rather than everybody individually having that card, which I think would probably be a better thing. Better way to do that. So the moves are pretty common. There's adventure moves, combat moves, quest moves, relationship moves, and suffer moves, which is basically anytime that you take some sort of harm or stress, damage, or anything, there's a little table you roll on. Adventure is your general stuff, gathering information, camping, etc. We talked about that. Combat is combat. Quests are making and fulfilling vows, which are pretty easy. We'll talk about that in just a second. And your relationships. Relationship moves are very important in this game, though I think that within the actual explanation of the games, they kind of undersell them a bit. Because you need to use the bond track on your character sheet. Which I didn't do basically at all for my first character when I was playing again, because I kind of forgot how important the bonds were. So the bonds, which are right here, you fill up this track, and this only comes into play, I mean, it comes into play while you're adventuring, because people you have bonds with gives you bonuses to rolls. and gives you the ability to sort of compel those people to help you. But when you're filling out this bond tract, you're filling out these boxes. When you decide to retire your character, that is a progress move. You make that move to retire your character, and you roll, instead of rolling your action die, you roll the 2d10, and you compare that to how many boxes you have filled on the bonds track. And that will determine how many of the things that you hoped would come true, and how many things you feared would come true for your player character did come true. So it's just a little epilogue thing, and then it gives you the opportunity to be like, okay, take what you want and write out a little paragraph that's like the epilogue to this character's story. So the games can be really long, they can be really short. It just kind of depends on how you want to play it. So because the way that they make quests or vows different or more difficult in Ironsworn is by using these little things right here: troublesome, dangerous, formidable, extreme, or epic. And that determines how difficult a quest is or the size of a quest. And so rather than because the DCs are random, we can't just bump up the DCs or throw more monsters at you. Well, it kind of throws more monsters at you. What you do is instead it's every time, depending on how difficult the quest is, vow is, depends on how many progress marks you make based off of the successes you have. So a troublesome one, you fill in three of the 10 boxes every time that you overcome some sort of milestone, you reach some sort of milestone. So in general, in most troublesome little adventures, you're going to be doing basically 3 big milestone scenes, and then you'll make a progress roll to fulfill your vow at the end. And there's a high likelihood, if you've done all 3 of those things, you've got 9 of the 10 boxes filled out. That's probably going to be that's usually going to be a strong success, or at least a weak success most of the time. Now, every once in a while, there is always the opportunity that even with 10 boxes full, you could roll 2 10s on the D10. There's still a 1% chance that you're going to do that. And if you do that, you fail. So there's no guarantee that you'll ever be able to fulfill one of the adventures. There's always at least a slim bit of a gamble when you're doing it. So keep that in mind. And the problem is when you fail a progress move like that, you usually start erasing boxes. And then there's been some sort of twist, or there's still more work to be done, and you have to weave that back into the narrative of the fiction that you're playing. Be like, oh, I thought this was the end of the story, but this is actually not the resolution. This is some sort of midway plot twist turning point, as we learn something more about the situation. So that's troublesome one. So troublesome one is the very low end one. Every milestone you hit along the way, you fill in 3 complete boxes. And now, on the exact opposite end, we have epic, which is the super long epic in scope, as the name implies. And for every time that you fulfill some sort of milestone there, you mark 1/4 of a box. So that means to fill up the entire thing, you need to hit 40 milestones to fill up an epic quest. And usually whenever you create a character, you start off with a background quest, which is sort of your overarching storyline, which is either going to be an extreme or epic quest. And so an epic quest, you're going to need to hit... You can try to fulfill your vows earlier than filling up all the boxes, but you really want to put yourself in a good position, so you're going to try to fill up most of the boxes. So you're going to need to fill up to 40 milestones. Extremes, about half that. You need to fill up about 20 of them. So it is a lot. What I will say is really helpful, and this bit of information is a little bit hidden. I thought it was a little bit hidden in the book, a little hard for me to find that I didn't see it on my first pass through, is that when you get these, and it makes it a lot easier to try to figure out these things, once you figure out how many milestones you need to fill up the track, and just start writing a little bullet point synopsis, being like, okay, this is the vow, like for the character I was just playing, their background vow is, their background vow? Oh, so in this first character I was playing, I made them sort of a road warden ranger kind of character, even though they weren't any good at combat. And their overarching background thing was an extreme, as I did at extreme. And that vow was keep the deep road safe. So they travel up and down this lonely road across the deep wilds, back and forth. So their milestone is basically anytime that they face some sort of danger or solve some sort of community problem along the deep road, help out travelers on the deep road, he gets to mark progress on that. Like, that's sort of the overall thing. He is tasked, that's the vow he's made, is that he is a warden of the deep road. He is there to make the place safe for the common folk and travelers and merchants and that kind of thing. He's fighting back against the beasts and the horrors and the bandits and solving problems like plague breakouts and stuff like that. So that was it. So that's an extreme one. So I would need, every time that I showed up to a community and they had their own problem, they would have their own separate vow that I'd swear to them, which would be like the little encapsulated mini adventure in the larger campaign, which is keeping the deep road safe for my character. So I'd be like, okay, these people, like the one I think of, they have some missing allies. Okay, well, let's go check out their missing ally situation, figure out which of the allies were some firstborn. There's some elves. There's a clan of elves that have disappeared from nearby that they were friendly with. It goes to investigate, finds this revenant that's been hunting them down, so they've fled. Trying to figure out the revenant, that's one of the enemy types that's in here. It is, what are the enemy types? Because they don't call them revenant. But it is sort of like a Draugr revenant situation. What are these guys called? An iron revenant, that's what they're called. Some vows are held so fiercely that they survive even after death. An iron revenant is an incorporeal force of furious resolve, the unfinished vow of an Ironsworn given horrible form as a construct of metal. Attacks may slow them down or temporarily break apart their armored form, but they have no flesh to pierce and cannot be killed. An iron revenant won't stop until their vow is fulfilled. So that was the thing he ran into, and it was a fun little adventure. Narrative stuff, like if you're interested in very much the story beats and making up the stuff, like Ironsworn is really great for that stuff. So if you want to have this, I had this cool epic adventure where I ran into somebody who's also trying to figure the situation out to find out that, oh, well, this person has been tricked and was told that, oh, the elves killed their love or their family or whatever it was, and that's who they had sworn their iron vow against, and then they died without fulfilling that oath. It came back as a revenant. They're hunting them, find out the elves aren't the problem. It's actually this other person who did this to you, and then having to construct a situation in which the Ironsworn basically either kills this person or finds out some other way to fulfill that vow. Because until that happens, this Iron Revenant isn't going away. My character cannot kill this Iron Revenant. He has to figure out some other situation to get around that. So there was a lot of compulsion and sneaking around to find evidence, and it's a little fun adventure. Which was very much in my character's wheelhouse, since my character sucks at fighting. That character sucked at fighting. So it was nice to have that. But yeah, that's sort of it. So talking about the characters specifically, since we're talking about them, you may have noticed looking back up here at, let's get back all the way back up here, at the character sheet, you may have noticed there's no class section. So this is not a class-based game, it is a skill-based game. As you gain motes of experience, basically you have to spend either 2 or 3 dots of experience to what you do is you pull up another asset card. So it takes 3 points to get a new asset card. It takes 2 points to upgrade an asset card. I know you can't see it on here, but a lot of these have 2 to 3 little upgrade slots on here. So this is the Fletcher one. So the level 1 Fletcher is when you secure an advantage by crafting arrows of fine quality, which is what I talked about with the fire arrows, then take +1 supply or +1 momentum on a hit, in addition to the +1 on the roll for what you're securing an advantage for. The second dot you can get when you resupply by recovering or gathering arrows after a battle, add +2. So that you add +2 to your roll, which makes it really great. So this character definitely wants to resupply every time after they do a fight, because the supply thing is very vague. And resupply, having a high amount of supply is really good for overland undertaking journeys, because you're going to spend a lot of supplies when you're just walking around. So it's really useful to have a character asset like this that allows you to get a +2 to those rolls after any combat you come across, which is really nice. And the third one is when you craft a single arrow designated for a specific foe, envision the process and materials and roll plus wits. On a strong hit, take both. On a weak hit, choose one. So, first option is Seeker. When a shooter uses the arrow to strike or clash, those are moves that you make when you're in combat. Reroll any dice, one time only. So, like I said, the other character that could reroll dice, this gives you the ability to reroll those dice. But it's only after you craft, so you have to craft the arrow first. Which would be another, like, secure advantage roll. And then the other option is Ravager. When a shooter uses the arrow to inflict harm against his foe, inflict plus 1d6 harm, one time only. Oof! 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 I did not read that before. That's super powerful. To add 1d6 harm? Man. That's a ton. That's I'll tell you in this game, that's a lot. Usually whenever you do something, it's like, oh, you get plus 1 harm. Now you have to take a couple steps before you can get there, but it does make you, if you take this Fletcher, you're like a specialized, like, I have an arrow of giant slaying kind of very specific thing. I'm thinking of like the black arrow for Smaug kind of situation. Very cool. And so yeah, you can upgrade those assets. That takes 2 experience points to do, and 3 experience points to get a new asset. And there's a whole bunch of assets to choose from. That's most of them. No, that's all of them, I think, for the most part. You can see, there's a fat stack of them. And they're broken up into some different ways. There's like companions, and rituals, and path, and combat. So it gives you a lot of options, so you're always going to be playing a new character, and you can always kind of make that character whatever you want. You assign your stats however you want. They tell you what to do. You get a, what is it, a 3, 2 2s, 2 1s? Something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think that's it. Yeah, 1 3, 2 2s, and 2 1s. To put in your edge, heart, iron, shadow, and wits. Edge is kind of dexterity. Heart is something between constitution and charisma. It's sort of a vim and vigor situation. Iron is also constitution, but also brawny strength. Shadow is sneaky, skullduggery kind of stuff. And wits, like any sort of tricks or deception, fall under shadow. Not heart. Heart is like when you speak from the heart, or you take heart, or things like that. And wits is well, it's your smarts, huh? It's your brain. And that's what that is. So super easy. I really don't even need that much explanation. Usually it's pretty common when you're looking at it when you figure out, because there are a few things like face danger, which allow you to generally roll one of any ability score you want with it, as long as you can justify it sort of in the fiction. So if you're like, I could just dodge out of the way, maybe that's edge. Maybe I want to hide behind my shield, and maybe you say that's iron. Or maybe it might be, you could also argue that it's heart if you need the courage to stand fast. You could use your shadow to be like, oh, as it comes at me, I'm gonna, try to trip him or something like that, or try to jump out of the way, or dodge behind, put a tree in between me and them, so we're kind of dancing around it, or whatever you want. Or jump into the shadows, or do some sort of, do a feint, or etc. And wits is anything smart, so if you see some opportunity, or kind of lead them towards maybe something like a ravine or something they can't see, or yeah. So it's very loosey-goosey, very free form, which is very common in these sort of narrative fiction forward games. That's sort of the aspect that you're going with. That's it. We talked about momentum already, and bonds. Debilities, I'm not really going to get into debilities. Debilities are just conditions you take. Usually as part of getting harmed, you take a harm or stress. Generally Not generally, but sometimes it will come with a debility. Especially once you hit these 0 marks down here, which, by the way, can be really easy to do, especially in things like health, because when you fight epic foes are like big Leviathan style, Leviathan in scope, not necessarily categorically sized Leviathans. But the idea is that they are such a potent epic threat that one single hit does 5 harm to you. Now, you might notice that these health tracks only go up to 5. So if you don't have any way to mitigate that damage or spread it around between yourself and some minions as an asset, some NPCs that you have with you, or have some other way to take it, you're going to basically immediately start taking debilities on one hit. And it's going those epic creatures take a long time to kill in a combat fight. So the likelihood that you're going to die is pretty high. Now, there's also things you can do to mitigate in actually loosey-goosey ways, and it is in the extended explanation of play in the book you can get down to, which is towards the back of the book. Here we go. There's gameplay in death. Mysterious sickness. I wanted to say they go into a fight. So as you can see, they outline the milestones that they're trying to hit in this adventure, where they need to save the Overseer, they need to find the trade caravan, discover what caused the sickness, find the cure, return home and deliver the cure. So that's the milestones they set for themselves on this quest. And those milestones are never ever going to be set in absolute stone. Something may happen, you may fail a roll, some new complication comes up, and you could just scratch them out, and the story may twist in a different way, and you may need to add some different milestones, or become its own sort of like mini quest within a quest, which is kind of the situation that I have with a lot of these games, is that it just kind of becomes this this spiral of more and more stuff sometimes, and you don't necessarily feel like you're making a ton of headway, which is one of the struggles I have with these types of games, without sort of like strong arming and being like, no, we are progressing on this. Well, I was hoping. Yeah, so it's this is the part that we were talking about. So there is adjusting challenge ranks. So if you have there's a part where they're doing the play example, extended play example, where they talk about, oh, they're gonna fight like this big nasty monster. They're like, oh, it's an epic threat. Actually, no, that's not it. Anyways, they're like, you're gonna face this epic threat foe, but we're actually gonna knock that down to a formidable throw, or maybe it was an extreme. They're knocking down a formidable, and that's very loosey-goosey. There's not like an actual mechanic built around that. It's just, oh, I was also sailing with other hardened warriors, so in this situation, because there are other hardened warriors with me, even though they are not, I don't have the commander asset, they are there, and because of the nature of just having more people that are also somewhat allied to me, that I'm going to knock down the difficulty of this foe or this situation from extreme to formidable, because they're also taking some of that heat. And that's a way to look at that. But it is very wishy-washy, loosey-goosey to make that. So I think that is one of the things that's helpful if you're not playing by yourself, if you're playing with other players, like in a co-op mode, or have a GM who can be like, this situation feels like it should probably be easier, and then you have somebody like the GM who's like, I can control these other unaffiliated NPCs that are not part of your assets, and I can determine what they're doing and how they help. Let's see, other things. So that's pretty much it as far as like how it plays. So one thing I do want to talk about, because we were just looking at the Iron Revenant, so we can look at one of these, like the Leviathans, an epic one. You'll notice that like this is the stat block, and these things, the features, drives, and tactics, actually aren't mechanically important. these are all just kind of like flavors for the narrative. The only thing that's really important up here is the rank. So it takes 1 tick of health. That's 1/4 of a box of health per every time it has harm dealt with it. And like I said, this is an epic threat, so it deals you, the PC, 5 harm every time it hits you, which is going to happen often, usually, unless you're really good at fighting and you have a lot of bonuses. So yeah, these creatures are really tough, but this is the thing where it falls apart. It was like, I'm not sure I could ever see myself as a game master running this kind of game. Maybe for a one-shot, but never like a long-term campaign, because I feel like I would get really bored. Because like other Powered by the Apocalypse engines games and other games that have been the du jour in the last few years, is that the game master doesn't roll dice, only the players roll dice. So as a game master, I'm often in a game, especially a game like this where there are very specific moves about what people do, there's a lot of just kind of, okay, and you do that. You want to do, what are you trying to do? Yeah, I think that's a face danger move, so go ahead and face danger. It sounds like you're trying to use shadow. Is that what you're trying to use? Yeah? Okay. So make face danger with a shadow, and don't forget to add your +1 bonus from whatever you're thinking. Like, that's kind of the gameplay, and that's personally for me in my GM style. I like to roll dice too. I don't want to just be the person who feels like they're more like a facilitator of the game than a person who's playing the game. It makes me feel like Blood on the Clock Tower. I was just thinking about that recently. Has the person who's got the tome, who's like running the game. Same thing with something like Mafia or Werewolf. You have one person who's like, I'm actually not playing the game, I'm just facilitating the game. And that's how I would feel as a game master in this situation. And I was like, that's nice. And I'm perfectly happy to do that for like maybe a one shot or maybe a very short adventure. But like, I don't want to do that for like months on end, weeks and months on end as a campaign. Like that's not going to be interesting to me at all. There's not enough for me to like sink my teeth into. So that was sort of my section with that. And I think when you have stuff like this, like it's showing in the Leviathan, and how you don't really get a ton of info for the monsters or how to set up adventures, really, it doesn't give you a lot of that stuff as for a game master section. There really is no just official game master section in here, I don't believe. I could be wrong. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But yeah, Chapter 1 Basics, Chapter 2 Your Character, Chapter 3 Moves, Chapter 4 Your World, Foes and Encounters, Oracles, Gameplay and Depth Index. So there's no official like game master section, and I think because there's not really anything to put in there. The Oracles is probably the closest, and these are just roll tables for the most part. And like here we have the R1 section. GMs can use oracles for support during play and to supplement their narrative decision making. So basically, the oracles are what you use like any solo game oracle, is you're using it because you don't have a game master. So instead of rolling on oracle stuff, the game master will usually just make those decisions. I wanted to show off some of the oracles. So we have our standard oracle table 1 and 2, which is an action and a theme. They use the very standard sort of verb, noun put together to just kind of bounce ideas back at you. There's one for regions. They call these oracles, but most of these are just standard roll tables, which I thought was a little confusing at first. Like region, location, coastal water location, location descriptors, settlement names. There's a big settlement name. Most of the gameplay is about journeying between different small settlements. So there's a lot of settlement stuff, as well as a quick settlement name generator, which I hazard to say is particularly faster, because in the settlement names you have to roll 2 D100s, and then also in the quick settlement name generator you also need to roll 2 D100s. So interesting. I used both when I was playing, and I was like, they're fine. They make place names. You can roll up, let's say, Woodmount, Great Stone, Greenbrook, Thornbarrow, Mornhill. Like, it makes pretty standard names. Like, the names sound great, right? They're very evocative, and they do fall in. They feel like real place names because of that prefix suffix, but it's all right. It's a lot of space to dedicate to just making the name of a place, I thought. Character roles, character goals, character descriptors is for NPCs, Ironlander names, elf names, and other names for giants, Faru, and trolls. Combat actions. This is probably one of the more useful ones to just pull out, regardless of what system you play. If you ever struggle with, like, I don't know what the bad guys should do on their term as a dungeon master or game master, sometimes it can be helpful to have like something like this, which is a combat action oracle that you just roll, and you're like, oh, this person is going to reveal some truth, reveal some sort of information the players don't know about the situation. They can reinforce their defenses. They can ready an action. They try to use the terrain to their advantage. They attack with precision. They attack with power. They seize something or someone. They try to compel a surrender. They coordinate with allies. So if you ever feel like you're in that situation, sometimes that I know a lot of Dungeon Master Game Masters feel like, I just feel like combats are really boring, then everybody just walks up and just slaps each other with weapons until one side falls down. Maybe you want to use something like these combat actions that are going to give you something else they'll do. Now, will they be doing damage in a lot of these? No. But it is also useful if you want to run combats that are more than just killing the other side. Even if we went back to just the session prep we were talking about earlier, really the session recap we talked about earlier, in both of those combats that they have with the cultists, at no point was the motivation for the PCs in that fight kill the cultists. They were just trying to get out of there. They did not want to have that fight. They were already low on resources. They didn't want to have that fight. They were just trying to escape the situation. Now, the bad guys are... he said the head priest, cultist, whatever you would call them, said kind of get them. So you can interpret that as try to grab them and pull them back, or just kill them. I know, they didn't get close enough. They never got close enough to grab anybody is the thing. So it was just a lot of shooting spells at people in ranged combat, because they were on the water. Oracle 17, Mystic Backlash is really cool. This is a cool one for if you have rituals in your game. I haven't played a character that's done rituals yet. But it is an interesting thing you can do. And you can rituals are part of the game that you don't necessarily... You can do a ritual without having a card for it, I believe. If you're just trying to do something like... If I wanted to have tried to do some sort of ritual to set... For my character to put that Iron Revenant to rest, we could have gone that route. But that character only has okay wits and didn't have anything else to kind of add to it. And really screwed the pooch, really buffed it on a gather information and compulsion check to try to make people help him. He didn't do very well on those. So he was kind of off by himself. So, unfortunately, wasn't really an option for him at that point. You can do that. You're tempted by dark powers. You are lost in shadow and find yourself in another place without memory of how you got there. So, you want to talk about really screwing up your adventure real quick? You try to do a rite to finish off an adventure, and you're like, yeah, you're just, you're gone, bud. And you don't remember how you got there. And you don't know, in a lot of cases, because of how the Ironlands work, probably just drops you in the middle of nowhere and you have no idea where you are. You have to go find some settlement first. And I think that is a good place to just kind of talk a little bit about the setting. So, I do want to bring this up because this is something that my friend that we talked about in our last stream. My friend talked to me about that he had wished that like the This Is Your Life section for in Xanathar's Guide to Everything for D&D, that kind of helps you kind of build a backstory and flesh out your PC. They were like, I wish there was something like that for game masters for building your own world. Well, empowered by the Apocalypse engine, because I didn't think about it at the time, I was like, oh, that would be nice. Without forgetting, it was like, oh, right, there are systems that do that. And this is one of them. because it's in that sort of design lineage, it also has those things. So this kind of just gives you some basic information about the Ironlands. We know that it's like a scraggly, barren hinterlands that's sort of in between boreal forest and tundra, so it's a real harsh climate, winter's coming kind of area. Traveling across it is bad. This is basically what you get, which is just... the Ironlands is just a nice peninsula that is really, really cold and really, really barren for the most part. And there are a couple different sections. They aren't necessarily like kingdoms, but they're just different areas of lands. So you have the Barrier Islands, the Ragged Coast, the Deep Wilds. So the Deep Wilds, that's number 3, where I said that deep road was that my character was doing. So he was doing this north-south road, basically, that just kind of like loops around. So I was like, oh, he travels and he finds a place and talks to people and does a problem. And then he travels and he finds a place and talks to people. Then he travels and, oh, he ran into some sort of monster in the wild and he deals with that. And he travels and comes to another community and talks to them about their problems, blah, 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 blah. Go again and again and again. He's just kind of working in a circle, filling it out. So you will notice on the map, other than just sort of the areas they set out, there's no specific places. Every time that you play this, you'll be putting down different sort of communities and landmarks. And then they give you a little section about what each place is kind of like, so you have an idea of sort of like the foes that should show up there. Like, one of the things that's in the Deep Wilds is right there. It's one of the few forested places. And I was gonna say, a few Ironlanders live along the fringe of the Deep Wilds, so most avoid the region because it's the land of the firstborn. This is where we run into some elves, right? Ran into the elves, got made elf friend. That's what I used one of the assets for. Once I finished that adventure, I took the experience points. I had enough experience points, and I took whatever. It's not elf friend, but it's something like that. You get a mask from the elves, a carved wooden mask that gives you some bonuses to a couple things, and it has a couple drawbacks. And I took that to represent, like, oh, he's been named elf friend, which is cool. Horrors, but yeah, this is the world before humans, so there's only just like a few places in there, so that's why being a warden on the deep road sounds like a really cool thing. Like, there's just this one isolated road that kind of runs north-south through the territory, and that is the purview of basically man, and there's a few isolated settlements along the way, but most of the Deep Wilds, there's nothing but nature and horrors and elves and giants and all sorts of weird stuff. Flooded lands, the Havens, which is where I think most of the Ironlanders live. The first Ironlander settlers looked upon the Havens as a fresh start. Hinterlands, Tempest Hills. So your truth. So this is the section I wanted to talk about. The following section is available as a separate workbook at ironswornrpg.com. Actually, I might just have that. Let me see if I can just I may have actually downloaded that. Like I said, you can go to ironswornrpg.com. Obviously, that redirects now, but... is it in the play kit? Let me see if it's in the play kit. Oracles, Ironlands map. No, I don't think it is. Nope. But I would say get this play kit anyways, because this is a lot easier. It's a lot easier to reference the moves on these pages than trying to flip back and forth through the book trying to do it. Because if you pull out most of these, if you print out most of these, you really won't need to look into the book for too many things. So my first character, I didn't print them out, but on my second character, I had printed them out and then needed to look at the book much less, which was nice. Like I said, it's kind of... it doesn't lay flat. I'd get that spiral bound if I could, if it was an option. But it is a lot easier to just have some loose leaf pieces of paper to go through inside of that. But anyways, so the Your Truth section is something they do in the Powered by the Apocalypse systems as well, which is basically every time that you're starting up a game, it's got some prompt questions for you to answer that tells you a little bit about the world that you're going to be playing in and some considerations for that world. So, in this one, the Ironlands, everybody who showed up in the Ironlands, the humans have fled the old world. So they are, people who are on an exodus from the old world. And this helps you determine, like, what was the issue with the old world? Why is everybody leaving? And the one that I was playing, where I said that I ran into my second character, where I said we ran into that Scold warrior boat. Obviously, I chose option 1, which is the savage clans called the Scold invaded the kingdoms of the old world. Our armies fell, most were killed or taken into slavery. Those who escaped set sail aboard anything that would float. After an arduous months-long voyage, the survivors made landfall upon the Ironlands. So, the way that I set up this campaign was that my character is like in one of the last ships that's leaving the old world. Like they're like the rear guard. They're one of the last few people who are making it off the old world. So, in the Ironlands, there are already established settlements, but my character and people with him are coming into the Ironlands fresh, and they don't know any of these people. They are going to find that character's uncle, who is trying to set themselves up as new nobility in that world. And so that's the background for them. For that secondary character is very much like, I think that it says, create what is essentially a dynasty for my family, to aid in securing them as nobility or petty kings or whatever you want to call them. So the old world, maybe it's war that's pushing you out. Could be some sort of plague or sickness, or the old world could no longer sustain us. Too large in numbers, they felled the forest, their crops withered, they're in famine and stuff like that, and that's why they left, because they had burned up the old world. Iron. The imposing hills and mountains of the Ironlands are richer in iron ore. Most prized of all is the star-forged black iron. So that's the one I chose for my second character too, because I had already set them up that they were going to be in the whatever the hills are called, the Tempest Hills. I knew that they were already going to be set up there because I just had rolled randomly, and I was like, oh, that works perfectly. That's why their uncle is so adamant. It was like, we got to find the Starforged Black Iron, and once we do that, that'll be the key to us becoming kings in this new world. The other one, weather is bleak. Only those made of iron dare live in this foul place. Inscrutable metal pillars are found throughout the land, very smooth as river stone. So it's kind of figuring out, what does iron mean in the world? Those are what these questions kind of mean. So the first one is, hey, what's the deal with the old world? Why are people leaving? Second one's like, okay, what is iron? What is iron? This is Ironsworn. That's the game. So what does iron mean to these people? So for some things, it's that Starforged Black Iron. In other ways, it's because this place is so damned and so blasted and so tough to survive in that only those who are made of stern iron survive. And then down here, inscrutable metal pillars. So there's some such as the Iron Priests worship them and swear vows upon them. The pillars do not tarnish. Even the sharpest blade cannot mark them. Other ones are these weird alien things that might be from the Firstborn and maybe are some note of some cataclysm that's coming to be. You can, if you want to go in the full mystical ritual side of the game, that's the one you choose. And of course, these are all just examples. You can make up your own, but you should have answers for what is the prompt, which is iron. But it doesn't do a good job necessarily of telling you that's what you need to do. It's just, you're going to have to intuit that some little bit. Legacy. We are the first humans. Other humans sailed here from the old world untold years ago, but all that is left of them is a savage feral people we call the Broken. Before the Ironlanders, before even the Firstborn and other people lived here, their ancient ruins are found throughout the Ironlands. So, I think, I'm trying to remember what I chose for that character. I may not have chosen one. I think I altered mine because we decided to be the last people coming from the old world. So I think that I wanted there to be the Broken, which are just kind of like Reaver savages, like people who have been broken by the land and lost their minds and are just wild. So I wanted those in there, but I didn't want that to be the focus. So I wanted the legacy to be like, oh, the legacy is where like one of the final clans of the old world, and we're trying to enforce old world ideas on a new world. So I went with that as legacy instead. And communities, you know, we are few in number. Like how many places are, how many people are there, how civilized is the land? Few in number in the cursed land. We live in communities called circles, ranging in size from a setting to a few families to a village of several hundred. We have forged ironlands into homes. Villages within the havens are connected by well-trodden roads. Trade caravans travel between settlements in the havens and those in the outlying regions. Even so, much of this land is untamed. So I'm kind of stuck. I kind of went with a mixture of 2 and 3. I wanted there to be like these small civilizations, kind of like almost like city-states. They're kind of living out there. These tiny little kingdoms. Nobles who are trying to consolidate power in their own tiny kingdoms. But I didn't want it to be quite as good as they have well tamed at least a part of this area. I'm like, oh, the Ironlands are somewhat tame. The havens are somewhat tame, but once you get outside of the havens, things are way more wild. And then leadership is varied as the people. Some communities are covered by powerful families, blah blah blah. Each of our communities has its own leader called an overseer. Every 7th spring, the people affirm their current overseer or choose a new one. Numerous clan chiefs rule over petty domains. Most are intent on becoming the one true king. Their squabbles will be our undoing. I obviously chose the last one. So, but this idea that unfortunately the people that my character is supporting is one of these clan chiefs ruling over a petty domain that is intent on becoming the one true king. And I'm not sure that my character, at least at this point, because I'm very early in the adventure, feels like the squabbles will be their undoing. He's just shown up. He's just put boots on the Ironlands, getting off the boat. So he has no idea what's waiting in store for him. And defense. Here in the Ironlands, supplies are too precious and the lands are too sparsely populated to support organized fighting forces. So who can you rely on as warriors? What kind of warriors are you going to come across? The wardens are soldiers, guards, and militia. They serve their communities by standing sentry, patrolling surrounding lands. And then I went with the third one. Our war bands are rallied to strike at enemies or defend our holdings. Not nearly as impressive as the armies that once marched across the old world, these forces are as well trained and equipped as their communities can manage. So I kind of went with them somewhere in between 1 and 3 for mine, because it's like I wanted war bands as I have the commander asset. It's like, but he's bringing an old world war band, like the dregs of the rear guard with him. Probably the last true veteran soldiers left. So he's bringing the berserkers with him. The really grizzled, hard what, the sort of survive their own little fantasy Dunkirk kind of situation, fighting the retreat and leaving. So there are going to be war bands, but they're going to be relatively small. But outside of that, when a community, I wanted to go with one. Most communities are, when they're threatened, those people stand together to protect their own. There's not usually like a whole bunch of, and this idea, I didn't want them to be like a true militia or a lot of wardens or things like that that had like a true constable policing force kind of thing. So I wanted them to pull in and be like a mixture of those, where my guy's already showing up on the scene as being like a very influential person because he has, a dozen warriors at his back, a dozen shields at his side. So it's true. Hey, how are you doing? Nice to see you. We're finishing up talking about Ironsworn. And yeah, so talking about questions that you want to answer about the campaign world as quick questions to help you get on your way. And then mysticism down here. We got a few more. There's always more questions than I remember. It kind of goes through you, so you can figure out what kind of foes you want to use in here. We don't really need to go through all of them. Mysticism kind of tells you about like how much magic you want in the world. I kind of went with this middle one. Magic is rare and dangerous, but those few who wield power are truly gifted. So you come across somebody who, a human that can use magic, an Ironlander that can use magic, and you're like, oh, that's a crazy priest, who lives off in the hilltop by themselves or whatever. Classic sort of wizard tower being alone kind of thing. Religion, I think I went with number 1. A few Ironlanders still make signs or mumble prayers out of habit or tradition, but believe the gods long ago abandoned them. I definitely think for my character and the characters that are coming from the old world, they're definitely of those. I do think that maybe people in the Ironlands are a little bit more of number 2, where they honor the old gods and new, and this harsh land of prayer is a simple but powerful comfort. But definitely not our gods are many and make themselves known through manifestations and miracles. The Firstborn. We know that the Firstborn are around in my campaign, so the Firstborn live in isolation and are fiercely protective of their lands. I almost went with 3, but I decided to go with 2. 3 is like they still have a hold on the Ironlands. But I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. I don't want to make it a lot of the campaign about them, because I felt like the campaign really was very human-centric, about humans fighting each other to stake their petty kingdoms in the land and turn themselves into true kings. By hook or by crook. Beasts. How many beasts do you want in the world? That's essentially what that's asking. And same thing with horrors. Nothing but stories to frighten children. I think that is the one I went with. Nothing but stories to frighten children. So horrors may come up, but people don't really believe in them. Most people don't see them. They hide in the darkest corners of the world. New campaign? I don't think it's going to be a new campaign right now. Especially not in running. Just Ironsworn, first and foremost, is a solo RPG. So I've been doing it. I've been playing around with it for the past week. Just kind of futzing with it. And it's been fun. It does remind me there's things that I don't like about Ironsworn, but there's a lot of stuff to like here, and the setting is one of them. I think if I was going to try to make a longer campaign out of it, I would want to set it in a slightly different setting. And Ironsworn is very clear that you can put it in whatever setting you want. Now, as with any TTRPG that has a strong theme like this, has a very strong theme like the Ironsworn does, which has this very much Ironlands focus, this sort of Vikinger kind of Nordic rough terrain kind of area, like that is very much cooked into the rules. It's difficult to translate that, but the one setting that I think I could translate it to that I would be interested in doing more with would be something like an Iron Age Britain. Doing some of this sort of Iron Age where it does feel like their communities are kind of far apart. You have the broken empires of the Bronze Age and things like that, or even if you want to look at something at Britain after Rome falls. And before you could do the Viking conquest, Viking raids into there, but I was thinking in that time in between. So really, those few hundred years there, before what is it? 790. Lindisfarne is what, 796, 795, something like that. And when the Vikings raid Lindisfarne off the coast, and kind of kicks off the Viking raids. Mapping your journeys, yeah, we talked about that already. We've got our foes and encounters, we've already talked about all this stuff. But yeah, so if you're looking for things, I think this would be helpful for those people who are looking for like the this is your life kind of question checklist for creating a campaign setting. I think that this something like this works really well. And whenever it was, I went too far back. This Your Truths section works really well. That prompts you with questions about different places and different ideas about that, and I think that you could distill this and extrapolate this, or mix it with other Powered by the Apocalypse games like Dungeon World, because they also have a Truths of the World section, and use those and combine those to be able to create an idea for yourself of a checklist when you're making a new campaign. Okay, regardless of what system you're playing with. Okay, what do I want? How many monsters do I want? What's the size of the civilizations do I want? How consolidated is power? How formal is that power? Like, are there standing armies or they're not? And I think it can give you a good idea, kind of understand, okay, this is kind of the vibe of the campaign. But I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about for Ironsworn, for the most of it. Yeah, I think that's... I'm trying to think if I left anything out. I think I got everything that I wanted to. Like, this is the section they have us playing as a DM. Playing as a GM. Which is, you know, not super long. It really is just kind of this one page. Deliver answers, return questions back to the players, facilitate, don't impose, embrace chaos. It says don't over prepare for your session. I'm not even sure what you would really prepare for your session. Since the quests are, like it says, so character driven, I'm not sure exactly what you would prepare for each session. I mean, like I said, it helps every time that you're... I think it helps with any sort of quest or vow that you want to put into the world. It's really helpful to have that bullet point of like the milestones you want to hit. But like I said about, you'll probably end up throwing maybe even up to half of those milestones out, as the players are gonna fail some rolls along the way, and you're gonna have a twist, and something's gonna change or be different, or they're gonna do something completely different, and it's very loosey-goosey. But at least just having some basic ideas, even if you don't fill out every single milestone, just having like 2 or 3 milestones that you think should be a part of fulfilling the vow of ending this quest or vow or adventure, depending on campaign, depending on what scope you've set this vow at, whether it's a short-term thing or it's a long-term thing. Just having some ideas of what potential example milestones might look like is very helpful. I found that very helpful when I was playing the game. Otherwise, I just felt like I was just kind of doing whatever. I felt like I needed some more guidance on that, and I didn't feel like the oracles really gave me that great of an idea, because like I said, a lot of the oracles aren't specifically real like solo play oracles. Though I guess I could, with each of them, rolled on those first oracles, which are the action and theme, and found out and had to interpret that a lot, but I'd prefer not to do that. But once I was like, okay, this is the quest. Here are, you know, a handful of milestones that I think might go into that quest. That gave me sort of a direction, which I felt was really useful for planning out and playing, where I wasn't spending nearly as much time being like, what's going to happen next? Okay, I just did this. I didn't really learn anything from it. And then trying to figure out whether, when you're doing something, whether it's enough to be counted as progress towards the task, because not all the moves you'll do will be milestones. So it was helpful to sort of at least try to plan some of those milestones out ahead of time. Does it have any interesting concepts that would translate well mechanically, like what we spoke on? Oh, interesting mechanics. It does have the abstracted supply, which is really nice. Let's see. I feel like there was something I said earlier, but I can't remember what it was. The bonds are nice. I think those would be a little bit more difficult to roll into something like D&D, but having a mechanical bonus. I mean, I guess as a dungeon master or a game master, you're probably doing that already, where you're being like, oh, it's very much like the Baldur's Gate 3, where it's like where you get the bonus for already having good relations with an NPC when you're rolling some sort of check. Same sort of thing, where having a bond gives you a bonus, so a mechanical thing. So I don't know. In Ironsworn, it gives you a +1, which is a pretty big bonus in Ironsworn. You definitely, that's why having the bonus that gives you a +1d6 on harm, being that Fletcher thing, whew, that's super powerful. But I don't know. Thing is like I don't feel like the quest stuff is really that good. At least for translation aspects. Yeah, I'm not really sure what would be a good translation, other than the attack actions. Talked about the attack actions table earlier. That would probably be one of the things that I'd pull over, or the "This is your truth" section. I would say that for people who want to do more exploration, discovery kind of stuff, I think copying moves like some move glossary. Let's go undertake a journey. So undertake a journey is really interesting. I think for those who were, if you're a dungeon master or game master who's looking to, you want to do more journey kind of stuff, but you're not really sure how to do it. Like, you understand how to run a dungeon, and you understand how to run, like, maybe a mystery in a city or something like that, but you struggle with trying to make that overland travel aspect more interesting. I think maybe copying something like this undertake a journey framework would be super helpful when you determine, like, okay, how difficult or far away is the travel that you want to do, and then you kind of make waypoints along the way depending on how far away they are. So if you're doing an epic journey, that's going to be like a whole campaign, and you're going to have, what, 40 waypoints? A max of 40 waypoints if you don't screw anything up, which is a very long, that's like a full, like, this is the campaign. The campaign's like getting somewhere. Which is very similar to what I was doing when I was playing the character who was more of a Deep Roads Warden. I mean, you could say that that entire thing was an undertake a journey kind of move. But that was just a vow. But very similar. And also maybe something like pay the price. Pay the price might be useful. Where's pay the price at? Aid your ally, right here. Where's pay the price? Why am I missing pay the price? Pay the price, pay the price. It's not under suffer moves, is it? No. Under stress house, supplies face setback. I don't know where it is. Oh, pay the price. There it is. It's a fate moves. It's way down the bottom for some reason. So the pay the price one is kind of nice. This is a nice table if you're looking for something that might translate somewhat well. Gives you an idea when you know that you need to provide a consequence for the action, but you're maybe not sure exactly what that consequence should be. Having a table like this might be kind of helpful. So, a person or community you trusted loses faith in you, or acts against you. A person or community you care about is exposed to danger. You're separated from something or someone. Your action has an unintended effect. Something of value is lost or destroyed. The current situation worsens. A new danger or foe is revealed. It causes a delay or puts you at a disadvantage. It is harmful. It is stressful, which is you're either going to take HP or what is mental HP. A surprising development complicates your quest. It wastes resources. That's your supply. It forces you to act against your best intentions, which means it might be forcing you to use a different stat than you would normally want to roll for, or something of that kind, or forcing you to be like, oh, I don't really want to get into a fight, and be like, oh, well, you're going to get forced into a fight, even though you don't want to. A friend, companion, or ally is put in harm's way, or you are if you're alone. Roll twice more on this table. Both results occur. If they are the same result, make it worse. And then roll 1 to 2 is roll again and apply that result, but make it worse. If you roll this result yet again, think of something dreadful that changes the course of your quest. Ask the Oracle if you're unsure, and make it happen. But yeah, that is Ironsworn. It's a fun game. It's not my perfect game. I still feel like I said in sort of the beginning with that fiction mechanics, fiction straightforward things, is that I don't think there's enough of a game here, I think, for the most time, for me, that's to really constitute an uppercase G in a TTRPG. Like, I want a little bit more. It's not even necessarily crunch. I just want to feel like more of a game rather than a random dice roll I do in between storytelling. Because I feel like I can get a very similar experience of that simply by using something like a straightforward oracle without having a 250-page book attached to it. And that's no slouch. I'm not cutting down on Sean's work here. I think it's really great. I think it's fun for the sort of people who are already people who enjoy Powered by the Apocalypse style of games, which is, I already know, is not me. They're okay, but it's not my... After my one campaign that I played with it, and so often I was struck with an analysis paralysis situation in which, because of the way that the weak hits or success at a cost works, that I often felt like the outcome of doing anything that I wasn't specifically like one trick pony built to be really, really good at, always felt like the detriment outweighed the benefit of it. And some of that I think comes down to GM style too. There's a GM that we were not always on the same wavelength about, and I think he and I and other members of the party sometimes struggled with that. So, maybe with a different GM running it, maybe I'd like it more. But I do think I don't like a game in which I'm playing a hero, but it feels like I'm failing, at least partially, the majority of the time when I'm rolling. And that's not a super fun table experience for me personally. I don't mind failure in my games. I like having plenty of failure in my games, both running them and playing in them. But it felt like even when I was doing things that I'm hyper-focused to be good at, I was still only sometimes successful. And then trying to do anything outside of the purview of this thin slice cross-section of things that I'm really good at in the game was just like, oh, and this will just be more stuff that wastes your supplies and resources and stuff like that. There were too many situations in which it would come to be my turn, and the GM would be like, what kind of move do you want to make, or what kind of thing do you want to do? And there was oftentimes where I was just like, I don't want to do anything, because I feel like anything that I do, because I can't do the one thing that I'm good at, so I felt like anything that I'm trying to do good, I would try to do on my turn, would somehow end up badly for me. So it made me want to not take action on things. And I'm like, if the feedback loop that I get from playing a game is that I don't want to play the game while I'm playing the game, is that I don't want to take actions in the game because I feel like those actions are just going to hurt me in the game, then maybe that's not the game for me. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily bad game design. The public has already spoken on that. Tons of people like Powered by the Apocalypse engine and those style of games. We like those very narrative forward, almost always success at a cost kind of thing. I just know for me, I don't find it as enjoyable when it feels like even the things I'm really good at are kind of a crapshoot as a character, and the things that I'm not good at, I'm really bad. And especially in a game like Ironsworn, where you're primarily playing solo, most of the things you're only going to be middling or kind of bad at, which means you're going to fail a lot, especially when you're low leveled, until you start picking up, unless you pick up assets that, with the specific reasoning that you're picking up the assets rather to be flavorful to your character, you're picking them up to be mechanically advantageous so you can use your companion assets or whatever to roll in your favor instead of you for the stuff that you're not good at, so they're kind of being a band-aid for your character. It can get real bad real fast. I didn't do that with my first character, and it was real tough going for a long time until I started picking up assets that did do that. Now, my second character, like I said, I picked up the Commander and the Kindred, so I have two companion characters who both can do rolls instead of me, which is very, very helpful. They can either aid me on rolls or do rolls instead of me, do moves instead of me, which is really helpful. So, and it's like, but I had to build a character that made sense for, because it would be real weird if I had played my first Road Warden style character and been like, oh, man, I'm really getting my butt kicked in these fights. I really need to pick up fights, and I picked up something like Commander and be like, okay, how do I make the narrative make sense in which this character who's sort of like a lone ranger kind of up and down the road protecting the road now has a war band at his back who follow him, and he's like a warlord. Like, how does that work? How do I make that work in the fiction? And that is a little bit more difficult to do, at least for me. But yeah, I think that's everything I'm going to say about Ironsworn, and I don't mean to dog on it here at the end. I think it's a fine game. It's for free. Don't take my word for it. Go check it out and play it yourself. IronswornRPG.com. That will redirect you to, I think, Tomkin Publishing or whatever their website is now. And you can pick it up for free. This full PDF that we're looking at, this is the whole book. That's the same thing I got here, except, you know, in beautiful digital form. Filled with lights and zeros and ones instead of paper and ink. And you can try it out and play it yourself. If you've got 2d10 and a d6, you can pick it up. Like I said, you'll probably need to print out these cards. That's extremely helpful. I don't even think, are the assets even, the assets are in here. I know the assets are in here. But they're not presented in that way. So you definitely want to pick that up. You can also find the free downloads on the website too. And that'll help you do that. So I'd suggest getting the play kit and doing that as well. Where are the assets at? That should be the last thing we look at, because I didn't look at them. So we should look at the assets and just kind of run through them so you can get an idea of what kind of characters you can make for it, because we haven't really gone into that. They are definitely in here, aren't they? Yes. Abilities, assets. Here we go. So let's look at assets just real quick before, and then that'll be the last thing we look at. So companions, you can have like an animal companion, like this hawk. Paths, which represent your background, interests, trainings, and skills. Combat talents, that's what it says on the tin. Rituals, that's basically how you do magic for the most part. And how you get them. Some of them you require, you have to meet prerequisites for. So some of those are down here. Like Ironsworn, you have to have marked a bond with the leader of a faction. Battle Scarred, you have to have been maimed, which is a ability. Ritualist, you have to have fulfilled your vow in service to an elder mystic and forge a bond to train with them. Once you do that, then you can add the asset. But most assets you can just pick up. No, is that really all you give me? No, that could be it. Oh, no, I guess that is it. I guess that's true. I knew that I wanted to print out the cards before, so I don't think I ever looked up the assets in the book. Yeah, no, the assets just aren't in the book, are they? That's okay. It's a free, like I said, it's a free download, so you can get it. It's not going to be a big deal. But that does mean that you're going to have to print it out. I don't have it in the play kit either. Where do I have it? I know I have it because I had to print them out. Because I did want us to, like, look at... There we go. There are the assets. The master set. This will give you the assets for everybody at this point. Go ahead and knock this out. We don't need that. So there are your companions. Cave lions, giant spiders, owls, mammoths, hounds, kindred, which is just like a person. A young wyvern, alchemist, animalkin, banner-sworn, battle-scarred, blade-bound, commander, which is the one I was talking about. So as you can see, all of these, almost all of them, I think there may be a couple that don't have any upgrades on them, but most of them have upgrades. And some of them, if you see ones like this, like the young wyvern, notice how none of the dots are filled in. That means whenever you get the card, you get to choose whichever dot to fill in when you get it. Otherwise, you get the one that's automatically filled in. Honorbound, Lorekeeper, Infiltrator, Improviser, Mask. That's the one that's got the elf mask I was talking about. Shadowkin. No, that's not the one I'm thinking of. Sighted, Slayer, Spiritbound, Veteran, Trickster, Waterborne, Wayfinder. Wayfinder, I believe, is one of the ones that my first character had. When you undertake a journey, take +1 momentum on a strong hit. If you burn momentum to improve your result, also take +1 momentum after you reset. Yeah. Archer, Brawler, Cutthroat, Duelist, Fletcher. That's the one I have for this new character. Long-arm, Slinger, Sunderer, Augur, Awakening, Communion, Divination, Leech. This is all your magic stuff. Shadow Walk. Shadow Walk is one that my first character had too. When you cloak yourself with Gossamer Veil of Shadow Realms, roll +Shadow. On a strong hit, take +1 momentum. then reroll any dice, one time only, when making a move by ambushing, hiding, or sneaking. This is how I was able to get my character, who was not very good at combat, able to actually function in combat pretty decently by having the ability to reroll the difficulty dice. They're kind of setting the target numbers, or DCs. Very useful. But then it kind of becomes just a situation where you're like, okay, time to secure an advantage. I will shadow walk, so that way when I get into the fight, I'll be able to do this. It's Talisman, Visage, Ward. That's it. That's all of them. And the Master. And we might talk about it at a later point. We might talk about this Delve book, but I have not delved into the Delve book yet. So I don't know too much about it. I do know that it's got the cool card system, which I already knew of and I've already liked and I already have printed out. These are slightly larger cards. You basically get a theme and a location to build a dungeon, a delve. So let's do one real quick, and it basically gives you a D100 table, a couple of D100 tables. So let's say a wild. Let me pick something out of the middle of the domain here. A wild sea cave. That'll be an interesting one. So we've got our theme and we've got our place. And then you take these two cards and you basically put them together to make a couple of D100 chart tables. The first one is a features table, and the second is a dangers table. So every time that you go into whatever the chamber or room of the dungeon is or delve, you might roll a feature. Let's say that I rolled anything that's 1 through 20 goes off of the theme, and then anything that's 21 to 100 goes off of the domain when it comes to features. And then on dangers, it's 1 through 30 is for the theme, and then 31 through 45 is on the domain. Anything that's 46 or plus, if I remember correctly, means that there's not a danger in that room. Which is nice, which means there's going to be some rooms that aren't going to try to actively kill you. Which is a nice change of pace. But let's do a theme. So you have Denizen's Lair, Territorial Markings, Impressive Flora, Fauna, Hunting Ground or Watering Hole, Remains or Carrion, Watery Tunnels, Eroded Chamber, Flooded Chamber, Vast Chamber, Dry Passages, Freshwater Inlet, Rocky Island, Waterborne Debris, Shipwreck or Boat, Something Unusual or Unexpected. You transition into a new theme, you transition into a new domain. So you can actually have dungeons that have multiple sort of areas in them, which is very cool. On the danger side, you have Denizen Hunts, Denizen Strikes Without Warning, Denizen Leverages the Environment, Denizen Wields Unexpected Abilities, Denizen Guided by a Greater Threat, Denizen Protects Something, Hazardous Terrain, Weather or Environmental Threat, Benign Aspect Becomes a Threat, Overzealous Hunter, Disturbing Evidence of a Victim's Fate, Ill-Fated Victim in Danger, Denizen Strikes Without Warning, Denizen Lurks Below, because it's CK, remember? But you could have very interesting things in which you're in a dry passage and the denizen lurks below, but you might be like, oh, it's a dry passage, but maybe the floor is just like sea ice and you can actually see it below you swimming by, and that'd be really cool. Flooding, Rushing Current, Claustrophobic Squeeze. So it kind of gives you the ways and gives you the sort of framework that I'm very interested in seeing. I already have my own sort of like solo dungeon delving system that I've cobbled together on my own, but I will be interested to get into the Delve book, which is the one I'm really excited about that my friend gifted me to learn more about and see what little pieces from that I can maybe pull over into my own situation, maybe improve my situation. And I want some more practice with the Delve cards, because I think that the idea of the Delve cards, the theme of domain cards, are really cool. And I think that has not been fully explored yet by any TTRPG system. And I definitely want to see what fertile ground that can provide in the future. So I'm very interested in that, and see how I can use it for my own stuff. But before I got into Delve, I had to make have to give myself a refresher on Ironsworn on how to play it, because that's going to be a big part of doing the delve. But now I've gotten into it, I've got a few hours of play under my belt, and I feel like I have a good handle on the rules with my second character. I can just show you real quick what that solo game kind of looks like, what that session with my second character looked like. I didn't write any of the stuff down from the first character, except the handwritten notes as I was playing. The second one I thought I'd have more of an example, so let's pull it over. I need this one, right? Nope, that's not the right one. Nope, that's not it. It should be that one. Oh, maybe I need to switch tabs first. There we go. Okay. There we go. So this is sort of the game that I played, the session 1 that I played for my second character. And I tried to do just a little bit more narrative stuff. So half may be called me half, what passes for clever by those who would chastise me is the same for being blunt and always in need of a strong hand to keep my edge true. Was always better with a bow than an axe or spear. Anyhow, remember he has the Fletcher asset. They knew that the first thing, so his first like big thing is like he's just trying to get to his uncle's place. And I knew that that's going to be, he's setting off from he's just now entering Ironland, so I thought this would probably be like a formidable journey. So the first third of this journey is just kind of him getting to the port, and that's what I played. So we have a schooled ship they run into, and they have a little combat. It gets to show off his specialty Fletcher thing, as he secures advantage by making arrows and fighting off the skulled ship, and then they run away through some dangerous shoals and make a face danger kind of move. Got through that, and so that was sort of the first aspect to get them in. First combat to kick things off in media res. Just kind of be like, boom, and we're going. And then journey through the barrier islands, which is undertaking a journey, 3 waypoints. We did that, we got through there, through the shoals. We saw our first ruins, giant ruins on the barrier islands. We screwed up some stuff in the middle there and took a little bit of stress. Saw our first Ironlanders. We saw this quarry that looks like it was burst from the inside out. We saw the first Ironlanders holding us straight from some towers, just watching us, and just trying to be a little bit more narrative with the description, kind of leaning into that aspect of it. Be like the old world, the Ironlands, different places and different people now. Not that it matters much, the former's gone. Like it or not, we'll all be Ironlanders soon. And then they exit the pass into the Interstrait, and that's the first piece of good news in what felt like forever, because I rolled a strong hit, finally, where we have good winds and smooth seas at that end of that undertake a journey, and pushes us right to our destination. And we pull into berth at the Ragged Coast harbor town of Red Hall. And that's going to give me a bonus onto that next roll for landing at Red Hall and outfitting the caravan, because they're basically going to sell the boat and swap out stuff because the rest of their journey is going to be overland. So, but that's what a session looks like, kind of. So there's the larger overall things, and then under that we have our first milestone, which was going to be the Skulled Ship fight, and the second one, which was Journey to the Barrier Islands. We got that done. So our third one's going to be outfitting the caravan and taking off. And each one of those, and I have to get, I can't remember, I think I need 10 milestones to finish that journey. Which is not our background task, but our background vow, but our immediate vow. It's a formidable one. But yeah, that's everything, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Went a little bit longer than I thought, but I wanted to make sure we got through that stuff. But thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll do this again soon. Not much else to say here. Thanks for watching. If you like the stuff, share it, like it, subscribe it, do all the things, hit all the boxes, probably notifications, send me your social security numbers, do all the fun stuff, and I'll talk to you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.